Chapter 2240 Flooding Sea. The flooding sea is a region where only those whose cultivation is beneath God Monarch can enter. For that reason, we usually observe from the outside. Once the area opens, the 9 skies will dispatch the conferred God Kings and God Kings under their command to head in and gather treasures. Under such circumstances, killing and plundering from one another is inevitable, so there are many casualties every single time. As for how many treasures each sky manages to collect, unless the God Monarch announces the result, no one will know. After recovering his strength, it did not take long for Little Chick to learn all about the flood of spiritual energy from the reports of his subordinates. Young master, I hope that you can enter as a God King of our sky of spirit origin and protect my juniors from harm. Of course, if it's not convenient for you, you don't need to bother about it. I'll try my best to protect them if I see any of them coming to harm, Zhongxian replied with a nod. Since the Fire Feather conferred God King and the others were juniors of Little Chick, they could also be considered his juniors. If they faced any danger in the flooding sea, it was only right for him, as a senior, to help them out. This is an insignia representing our sky of spirit origin. By wearing it on your chest when you enter the flooding sea, others will know which power you are from. Based on that, they will decide whether they should collaborate with you or fight against you, Little Chick said as he passed an insignia over. Zhongxian took the insignia and pinned it on his chest. On top of the respective factions of the 9 God Monarchs, there would also be unaffiliated cultivators entering the flooding sea in the hope of obtaining more resources. This insignia would prevent others from mistaking him as an unaffiliated cultivator, thus reducing the danger for him. Even though the flooding sea was generally viewed as a lawless zone, individuals would still have to think twice before killing the subordinate of a God Monarch. The flood of spiritual energy grows stronger every single time, and the treasures that appear become more and more formidable, Little Chick said. In fact, last time, there was an object that was useful even for the God Monarchs. Due to that, the Heaven Subjugation Monarch was able to reach a level comparable to God Monarch Lingxi within just 40 years. I heard that the other God Monarchs have nurtured quite a few experts for the flood of spiritual energy this time. They even resorted to using the space-time mirror to distort temporal laws so that they would have ample time to cultivate. The battle this time around will likely be even more difficult than before. Young master, you must be careful. He had heard that the God Monarchs had been focusing their efforts on nurturing a new generation of conferred God Kings over the past month. As for the names and abilities of those conferred God Kings, he had not had time to look into it just yet. However, given that their rivals were well prepared, they would have to make sure to proceed carefully to make up for their disadvantage. It was true that Zhongxian was practically matchless against opponents beneath God Monarchs, but there was a good chance that the enemies would gang up on him. If he came under the encirclement of dozens of conferred God Kings with all sorts of artifacts and formations thrown at him, even he would be placed in a perilous position. Furthermore, it was rumored that the flood of spiritual energy contained many natural traps that could threaten even a God Monarch. Knowing that Little Chick was advising him out of goodwill, Zhongxian accepted his advice with a nod. The 3 of them quickly tore through space to head over to the flooding sea. The flooding sea was located at the edge of the world. When Zhongxian saw the scenery before him after walking out of the dimension rift, he was unable to speak for a long while. Near the edge of the blue sky above him, there was a massive enigmatic hole that appeared to lead to some unfathomable location. The violent energies within the fissure had been sealed by a light barrier. However, the light barrier was extremely thin. It looked as if it would collapse at any moment now. Little Chick looked at the pitch-black fissure in the sky with a fearful look on his face as he explained, 40 years ago, that black fissure suddenly appeared in the midst of the sky, and like a deflated balloon, the spiritual energy within the firmament began to gush outward. This resulted in what we've come to know as the receding of spiritual energy. Why would the fissure suddenly appear? And, who was the one who killed you back then? Zhongxian asked. He had been puzzled by this question for a long while. Just who in the world had the ability to kill the Deathless Monarch? Except for other God Monarchs, there should have been no one who had the ability to kill the Deathless Monarch. What in the world happened 40 years ago that led to his demise? Could it have something to do with this fissure that had appeared out of nowhere? Thinking about it, Kongsha had also appeared in the world roughly 40,000 years ago on the master-teacher continent, which equated to around 40 years ago in the firmament. The fissure in the firmament's sky and Kongsha obtaining heaven's order. Could there be a link between the two? I seem to have lost all memories regarding my death. I have already regained my cultivation, but somehow, I simply can't recall that event. However, my intuition tells me that it has something to do with the fissure over there. Little Chick replied grimly. You have lost your memories? Zhongxian was taken aback. In the entire firmament, other than Luo Ruoxin and Kongsha, there did not seem to be anyone who wielded the ability to erase a god monarch's memory. No, it's not god monarch Lingxi or Kongsha. Little Chick overthrew Zhongxian's thoughts. When the fissure first appeared, Kongsha was still on the master-teacher continent, and he had just been born. On the other hand, god monarch Lingxi was busy trying to seal off the fissure to prevent spiritual energy from leaking. She had to inform the other skies and construct a grand formation to repair the damage. She wouldn't have had the time nor the energy to make a move on me. Seal off the fissure? Are you saying that the seal on the fissure was created by Ruoxin? Zhongxian asked. Yes, that's right. Little Chick replied. As he had died shortly after the fissure appeared, he was unaware of many things that had happened over the past 40 years. However, he still had subordinates that would report to him about the aftermath of that incident. Zhongxian frowned. It seemed like the situation was far direr than he had thought, which was also why Luo Ruoxin and Kongsha had to complete their battle then. This could be a side effect of the fragmentation of the heavens, which meant that his library of Heaven's Path had something to do with this as well. While the two of them were talking with one another, the black fissure shook and became even more glaring. A powerful burst of spiritual energy tore through the seal and began sweeping outward like a tornado. The sky darkened under the outburst of spiritual energy, dimming even the sun's glow. It felt like the black tornado was swiftly sweeping across the entire firmament. Quick, enter. With a bellow, innumerable silhouettes in the area rushed into the tornado, vanishing from sight. Has the flood of spiritual energy begun? Zhongxian asked with a grim expression. He had thought that he would still have to wait a while longer, but who could have known that everything would happen so quickly? It started. The rest of them have already entered, so young master, you should hurry, Little Chick replied. With a raise of his hand, he was just about to send Zhongxian and Luo Chichi in when. Wait a moment. There's still one last thing that I want to ask about. Didn't you mention that the fissure has been absorbing the spiritual energy of the firmament? Why would it suddenly pour out spiritual energy during the flood of spiritual energy? Zhongxian asked hurriedly. He could not help but feel that something was really amiss about this, and it made him feel a little unnerved. I don't know either. However, like the tides of a sea, the spiritual energy that comes out will surge back in after a period of time, and the amount of spiritual energy it releases isn't even 1/100th of what has been consumed thus far, Little Chick replied. The firmament had simply too many secrets, so even he, a god monarch, could not possibly know everything. Seeing that Little Chick did not have the answers he sought, Zhongxian wrapped himself and Luo Chichi within his soul energy before having Little Chick send them into the flooding sea. When he opened his eyes once more, he was already standing in the middle of a barren land. His surroundings were filled with rocks and chaotic spiritual energy, and there were no plants or life forms to be seen. Chapter 2241 Reunion of Zhongxian's lineage. This is the flooding sea? Zhongxian was a little taken aback. He had thought that the core of the flood of spiritual energy, which was powerful enough to force the 9 god monarchs into action, would be filled with concentrated spiritual energy, perhaps even to the extent where the spiritual energy would condense into water droplets. Yet, it turned out to be even more barren than the firmament. Given the extent that the other god monarchs went to preparing for the flood of spiritual energy, there must be some treasures in here. Let's just take a look around the area. After a moment of shock, Zhongxian decided not to think about this anymore. Together with Luo Chichi, he quickly flew toward the depths of the flooding sea. 10 minutes earlier. Floating above the flooding sea were the god monarchs. It seems like it's going to start very soon, the cloud dragon monarch remarked with a glint in his eyes. Indeed. The other god monarchs nodded in agreement. Recalling the battle a few days ago, God Monarch Fuming of the Sky of Adamant Gold shook his head. All this time, I thought that the ability to become a God Monarch was dependent on one's bloodline and that it was impossible to advance any further after reaching this level. However, after witnessing the fight between God Monarch Lingxi and the Heaven Subjugation Monarch, I realized that God Monarchs can grow stronger as well, and there is huge room for them to do that. All this while, they had thought that they had reached their limit and could not advance any further, so they had begun to slacken. Yet, when they saw how much stronger the Heaven Subjugation Monarch was than them despite only having joined their ranks 40 years ago, they realized that they had been sorely mistaken. There was still something above them, and they needed to reach out in order to get there. God Monarch Shuoyang of the Sky of Blazing Sun laughed heartily. In the last few flood of spiritual energy, the disciples of the Heaven Subjugation Monarch have been able to claim the bulk of the treasures through their superior strength. However, without the Heaven Subjugation Monarch's help, they won't be able to enter the flooding sea anymore. With this, our chances of obtaining the treasures have greatly increased. There was a bizarre power surrounding the flooding sea that prevented God Monarchs and conferred God Kings from entering, but through the sheer power of the God Monarchs, it was still possible for them to teleport their conferred God Kings in. However, with the death of the Heaven Subjugation Monarch, the conferred God Kings under his command would not be able to enter the area anymore. All this while, God Monarch Shuoyang's subordinates had been suppressed by the disciples of the Heaven Subjugation Monarch, and that had left him frustrated and exasperated. But now that the Heaven Subjugation Monarch had finally met his end, it was time to usher in a new era. The Akron God Monarch harumphed. Don't forget that young fellow beside the Deathless Monarch that day. If he joins, it'll be hard to say who the real victor of the flood of spiritual energy will be. The conferred God King of the Nine Skies' soul cultivation far surpassed that of other conferred God Kings, making him an extremely tough foe to deal with. As formidable as he is, the only thing he has is his soul cultivation. His physical body and Zhenqi cultivation are still at God King realm primary stage. As long as we bestow artifacts to protect their soul upon our descendants, there will be nothing he can do at all, God Monarch Shuoyang said. How could they remain unprepared after knowing that there was such a formidable expert coming from the sky of spirit origin? If that young man had another half a year or so, there was indeed a chance that he would grow to a level far beyond the imagination of anyone else, but within a short 1 or 2 days, the most he could do was stabilize the energy that he had received from the world confirmation. Under the circumstances that his physical body and Zhenqi cultivation remained weak, as long as their descendants were able to protect their souls, they should be able to beat the young man easily. In the end, someone who was a conferred God King just in terms of soul cultivation could not possibly hope to fight against a full-fledged conferred God King. Shuoyang is right. The conferred God King of the Nine Skies might be formidable, but he hasn't reached the peak of his growth yet. The God King that I conferred not too long ago, Zhao Ya, should be able to subdue him easily. God Monarch Fuming laughed heartily. The talent of the young lady whom he had devoted a lot of resources into grooming was a terrifyingly talented prodigy. Her fighting prowess was so great that she could even beat several veteran conferred God Kings with ease. Once she exerted her full strength, even the conferred God King of the Nine Skies would have no choice but to submit to her. It was impossible to borrow the power of the heavens in the flooding sea, so it did not matter whether the young man was acknowledged by the world or not. There was no way he stood a chance at all. I have heard of conferred God King Zhao Ya of the Sky of Adamant Gold, but our conferred God King Zhengyang won't pale in comparison to her at all. If the two of them get into a serious fight, I reckon that your Zhao Ya won't be a match for my Zhengyang. God Monarch Shuoyang harumphed derisively. Hey, it's not as if the two of you are the only ones who managed to pick up gems, Demon Monarch Chenkuan said with a grin. Lu Chong of my Sky of Drifting Spectre might not be exceptional in fights, but if he escapes after gathering all the treasures, none of your conferred God Kings will be able to catch him. As one who specialized in soul arts, his fighting prowess was not too strong among the 9 God Monarchs. However, when it came to searching for treasures and evading enemies, there was definitely no one who could compete with him. The Akron God Monarch chirped in as well. You lot only have a single prodigy with you, but my Sky of Akron has Yuan Dao, Dan Xiaotian, and Bai Xiaoqing. No matter how you look at it, my chances are much better than yours. My Sky of Cloud Dragon also has Kong Shiyaro, Liu Yang, and Zhong Zhouxiao, the cloud dragon monarch added. As god monarchs, it was inevitable that they would be incredibly proud and egotistical individuals. It had not been easy for them to find successors that they were satisfied with, so it went without saying that they had to brag a bit about it. Seeing how these god monarchs had been kept in the dark, Fairy Linglong could not help but snicker quietly in the depths of her heart. If your successors are so outstanding, why don't you bring them out and have them compete against one another? Sure, let's have them fight against one another to see who's the best. The Cloud Dragon Monarch nodded vehemently in agreement. Kong Shiyaro, Liu Yang, and Zhong Zhouxiao, come over. Who? 2 men and a lady flew over and took their places beside the Cloud Dragon Monarch. They each emanated a sharp aura that felt as if it would rip space apart. Zhao Wei, you come over as well. God Monarch Fumeng beckoned with a wave of his hand. A young lady flew over. Seeing how the 2 god monarchs had summoned their conferred god kings over, the others also quickly called theirs over. Soon, 11 young men and women joined the god monarchs at the flooding sea. They sure are exceptional youths. Seeing the young men and ladies before them, even though the god monarchs did not want to admit it, the conferred god kings nurtured by the other god monarchs did not pale in comparison to theirs. Sighing deeply inside, just as they were about to remind their conferred god kings to continue working hard so as to not lose to others, they saw the 11 youths clasping their fists toward one another. Senior, junior. There were excited smiles on their faces, reminiscent of close friends who had finally reunited after a long time. Wait a moment. Senior, junior. Other than Fairy Linglong, the other 5 god monarchs stared at one another with widened eyes. Even with the wisdom they had accrued over countless years, they were having some difficulties trying to grasp what in the world was going on before them. I groomed you so that you can enter the flooding sea, defeat the other rivals, and bring the treasures within over to our sky. Yet, what does senior and junior mean? Does this mean that all of you actually know each other? All of a sudden, they felt a bad premonition inside, as if they had overlooked something really important. Unable to take it any longer, the Acheron god monarch asked anxiously, Yuan Dao, what is going on here? The other god monarchs also immediately pricked up their ears to hear about it. They wanted to hear what the young man had to say. Your sovereignty, allow me to introduce everyone to you. Zhao Wei over here is my first senior, Wang Ying is my second senior, Liu Yang is my third senior, Zheng Yang is my fourth senior, I am ranked 5th, Lu Chong is my 6th junior, Wei Ruyan is my 7th junior, Zhong Zhouxiao is my 8th junior. Yuan Dao began introducing the other youths gathered above the flooding sea to the Acheron god monarch. The Acheron god monarch, the Cloud Dragon monarch, Demon monarch Chenkuan, god monarch Shuoyang, and god monarch Fumeng. The geniuses we have spent such a heavy price to nurture are actually all from the same lineage. Dear heavens, is there anyone who can tell me what is going on? Chapter 2242 For whom did we work so hard? If you are all from the same lineage, then your teacher. The Acheron god monarch felt so stifled that he really felt like fainting there and then, and the other god monarchs also had eyes widened in disbelief, as if they had seen a ghost. They had long heard from these youths that they had a teacher back when they fetched them from the Celestial Mountain, but which cultivator did not have a teacher? So, they did not think much of the matter at all. After all, they could not even fathom the possibility that all 11 successors of the 6 of them would actually have the same teacher. Just who in the world was their teacher? How did he manage to gather so many prodigies? Our teacher is. Yuan Dao was just about to reveal the identity of their teacher when Zhao Wei suddenly shot him a cold glare. Shut up. Why yes. Yuan Dao immediately sealed his mouth as cold sweat dripped down his back. Only after hearing Zhao Wei's shout did he remember that their teacher was humble and low profile and hated to be in the limelight. Revealing his identity before these 6 god monarchs would go against his virtue of humility, and it would be considered an unfilial act from him. Furthermore, during this period, they had been cultivating in the space-time mirror, which resulted in them being isolated from the rest of the world. As a result, they had no idea of their teacher's current situation. There was no saying that they might be putting their teacher in a bad position by revealing his identity. Zhao Wei clasped her fist and replied, Your sovereignties, pardon us, but our teacher seeks to live a quiet and peaceful life. His little known in the firmament, and he wishes to remain as such. As his disciple, we don't dare reveal his identity without his permission, so I beg for your understanding. To be able to groom so many outstanding disciples, your teacher must be an outstanding individual. God Monarch Akron said, but halfway through his words, the spiritual energy around them suddenly grew chaotic. The flood of spiritual energy was beginning. Since all of you belong to the same lineage, it would be too cruel to ask you to fight against one another. Let's do it this way instead. The treasures will belong to whoever obtains them first, and no snatching is allowed. Even though they were caught off guard by this turn of events, what had already happened. If they were not going to compete by strength, they could only compete based on luck. Right before everyone was going to enter the flooding sea, the Cloud Dragon Emperor suddenly said, "Many dangers lurk in the flooding sea. You might be our successors, but you still need to be careful." Zhao Ya and the others turned their eyes over. Over in the sky of spirit origin, there is a young man around your age. Due to his exceptional talent, he has managed to receive the world conferment to become the conferred God King of the Nine Skies, the Cloud Dragon Monarch said. If you encounter him, make sure to protect your soul well. He possesses exceptional soul cultivation, so it would be best for you to suppress him through physical means. Indeed. You are all from the same lineage, right? If it comes down to it, it might be better for all of you to stay together. That will lower the danger considerably, God Monarch Shuoyang added. He might have said that his conferred God Kings did not fear Zhongxian, but truthfully, he did not really mean it. The conferred God King of the Nine Skies. This was a title that only the Heaven Subjugation Monarch had obtained in the whole history of the firmament, and his fighting prowess was there for everyone to see. They were not confident of having their conferred God Kings moving independently, but if all 11 of them made a move simultaneously, even if that conferred God King of the Nine Skies cultivated his physical body and Junchi cultivation to the highest level, he would still be no match for all of them. Rest assured, we'll look out for one another. No matter who the conferred God King of the Nine Skies is, if he dares court trouble, we'll make sure to return the favor to him. Zhao Ya replied with a nod. As kin from the same lineage, they needed to take care of one another. That was how their teacher had taught them. They could not let him down. Good. Go in then. Hearing those words, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief. The Cloud Dragon Monarch, God Monarch Shuoyang, God Monarch Fuming, and the others tore apart the space before them to send their respective conferred God Kings into the flooding sea. Ha ha ha. After everyone entered the flooding sea, Fairy Linglong was finally unable to restrain herself any further and burst into laughter. Linglong, what are you so happy about? The Cloud Dragon Monarch asked. Well, it's just that I thought of something that is really interesting, so I couldn't stop myself from chuckling, Fairy Linglong replied as her eyes curved into beautiful crescent moons. Do you something? Tell us, and we can discuss it together, the Akron God Monarch said. Are you sure you want to hear it? Fairy Linglong asked with a glint in her eyes. The crowd nodded. Of course. Well, I guess it should be fine to tell you about this. Fairy Linglong muttered before chuckling to herself softly. Then, she raised her head and said, Aren't you worried that Zhongxian might obtain innumerable treasures in the flood of spiritual energy and become the next Heaven Subjugation Monarch? Well, there was no one who replied to Fairy Linglong's question. None of them would admit it, but they were indeed worried about Zhongxian's growth. Dealing with one Heaven Subjugation Monarch was enough, they did not want to witness the rise of another one. If they were challenged and defeated one after another once more, just as the Heaven Subjugation Monarch had done, their egos would not be able to take it. Thinking about everything that had happened over the course of the past 40 years, they felt so incredibly indignant. Do you hope that the successors you have groomed will defeat Zhongxian and bring the treasures of the flooding sea over to you so that you can overcome your current bottlenecks? Fairy Linglong asked once more. God Monarch Shuoyang lost his patience and harumphed coldly. Linglong, just what are you trying to get at? We all saw the battle 2 days ago, and I don't believe that you weren't moved by what you have seen. They might be God Monarchs, but they, too, wish to be stronger. It was their previous negligence during the flood of spiritual energy that brought about the swift rise of the Heaven Subjugation Monarch, and they were not ready to allow the rise of the second one. It was for this reason that they had nurtured their own batch of experts. Just get straight to the point, God Monarch Fuming harumphed impatiently. Is there any point in you playing such games with us? The Cloud Dragon Monarch was also swiftly losing his patience. I was about to get to the point. Just thinking about how they would react to the news made Fairy Linglong chuckle beneath her breath once again. Seeing how she had managed to build up the mood to the climax, she finally embarked on the grand reveal. Aren't you curious who Zhao Ya, Zheng Yang, and the other's teacher is? It just so happens that I know who he is. Who is? Halfway through his words, the face of a person suddenly surfaced in Demon Monarch Chen Kuan's mind. His body stiffened as he asked warily, could it be that? Indeed. It's the person you have been worrying about all along. Zhong Xian. Fairy Linglong said gleefully. After becoming god monarchs, there were very few things that could faze them. This was the first time she had seen such a look on the faces of her old companions. And it was all because of that young man. To make things worse, the young man did not even know what he had done. There was nothing more frustrating than being infuriated with a person, but the other party did not even know what he had done. This. The 5 god monarchs glanced at one another as a burst of inspiration flowed into their heads. A lot of classical poems surfaced at the top of their mind. Cities I have conquered, an acre of mine none, for whom have I been working so hard? 100 flowers I have harvested for honey, only to have it all taken away. How I resent the years I spent weaving golden threads, all to deliver a gown to your hand. God Monarch Lingxi is your girlfriend, the deathless monarch is your tamed beast, and you are the conferred god king of the 9 skies. As if that's not enough, the successors whom we have groomed with great difficulty are your disciples too. Feeling deeply suffocated, the 5 god monarchs clutched their hearts tightly. They felt like there was something strangling them. They had hoped that they could make use of the flood of spiritual energy to rise through the ranks and become as powerful as the Heaven Subjugation Monarch, but just like that, all their hopes had shattered. How could such a thing happen? Was there no justice in the world? Chapter 2243 Risk and Danger 2 in 1. There sure is a lot of good stuff here. Advancing alongside Luo Chichi, within just 4 hours of flight, the treasures that he had gathered were already comparable to what he had earned in the firmament over the past month. He had been selling batch after batch of beauty pills and breakthrough pills non-stop, resulting in him accruing a great fortune. Yet, he had managed to earn the same amount within 4 hours. This was how valuable the treasures in the flooding sea were. However, that was largely due to Zhong Xian's powerful soul. Because of that, he was able to perceive his surroundings with greater clarity, and the area that his senses covered also far surpassed that of other cultivators. The other conferred god kings surely would not be able to find the treasures as efficiently as he did. Amid the barren land filled with shattered stones, there were quite a few precious medicinal herbs growing, and every stalk of them would be worth a fortune in the markets of the firmament. There were also ores, metal. By refining these items, he would be able to forge even God King realm pills and weapons. But these items aren't very useful to me. Zhong Xian shook his head. It was true that these medicinal herbs were valuable, but even pinnacle god essence pills were not of much use to him anymore. Unless he could obtain something beyond that level, he would not be able to raise his Jinchi cultivation any further. There is land ahead. As they flew a little further, they realized that there was land ahead of them. It would be tempting to call it an island, but it seemed to cover a massive area, such that they could not see the end of it. What was different about it was that it was actually rich in spiritual energy, and lush plants thrived on the land. It could be that when the fissure appeared in the sky, even the land of the firmament was swept in as well, Zhong Xian deduced. It was due to the size of the fissure in the sky that spiritual energy escaped from it so quickly. It would not be surprising if some land had been swept in as well. Landing on the ground, Zhong Xian immediately cast his spiritual perception around him, and he could sense that there were innumerable treasures lying all around him. Ores that were rare in the firmament filled the land, and even a nearby river was made entirely out of condensed spiritual energy. There's someone over there, Zhong Xian noted. There were others who had noticed the place and landed there. Not too far away from them, there were 12 people, a conferred god king and 11 god kings, gathered closely together. They seemed to be discussing something intently with one another. The other party had noticed them as well and asked, "Friends, would you like to join us?" Zhongsha. Luo Chichi glanced over. "Let's head over." Zhong Xian nodded. They were all there for the same purpose, so there was no need for them to intentionally avoid them. Walking over, Zhong Xian realized that the only conferred god king of the group carried the insignia of the Sky of Cloud Dragon. "Friends, I am conferred god king Ao Feng of the Sky of Cloud Dragon." The conferred god king introduced himself with a clasped fist. Zhong Xian clasped his fist as well to return the greeting. "We are all here to seek our fortune, but there's only so much that we can do alone. We are weak in the face of danger. However, if we can put our strength together and look out for one another, there is a lot more that we can do," Ao Feng said. The crowd nodded in agreement. It would indeed be dangerous if they ventured alone as mere god kings. There were many dimension rifts and traps that were hard to deal with. The slightest carelessness could very well spell their death. Furthermore, they were not guarding against just the traps from nature. There were conferred god kings and god kings scouring the area to pick on easy targets. It was one thing to find treasure, but it was another thing to take it out of there safely. For this reason, half of the god kings and conferred god kings who entered the flooding sea would end up losing their lives each time around. As you know, unless a god king earns the acknowledgement of a god monarch and overcomes the trial of conferment, no matter how they cultivate, they won't be able to advance their cultivation any further. Their lifespan will be capped at 10,000 years. Once their time is up, that will be the end of them, Ao Feng said. The 11 god kings around him could relate deeply to those words. The hurdle to becoming a conferred god king was not one that could be overcome just by cultivating diligently. There were many god kings in the firmament that could only live in despair after realizing that there was simply no chance that they could advance any further. All of you should have received quite a few treasures from the flooding sea already, probably enough for you to push your cultivation up to god king realm pinnacle. But have you thought of what comes beyond that? Your lifespan won't be increased just because you have reached god king realm pinnacle, Ao Feng said as he slowly looked at the faces of those gathered around. The only thing that is in your way is the acknowledgement of a god monarch. We also know that if we can earn the acknowledgement of a god monarch and receive their pointers, we should be able to clear the trial of conferment easily and possibly become a conferred god king. But people like us don't even get the opportunity to meet the god monarchs, so how can we earn their acknowledgement? One of the god kings remarked with a resigned look on his face. Who did not want to earn the acknowledgement of a god monarch, the highest existence of the firmament? But god monarchs were lofty beings who lived a world of their own. How could it be easy to catch their eye? There was once a god king who attempted to amaze a god monarch by putting on a grand performance, but in the end, what he received was not the acknowledgement of the god monarch but a slap that condemned him to death. Ever since then, all cultivators had realized that it was futile to attempt anything excessive before the god monarchs. Through years of experience, the god kings had realized that there were two key factors one had to meet in order to earn the acknowledgement of a god monarch. First, one had to be sufficiently talented. Second, one had to be recommended by someone in power. Without these two in place, there was nothing they could do that would work. I wouldn't be saying all of this if I didn't have a way out for you. Seeing how he had managed to catch everyone's attention, Ao Feng said with a chuckle, "The truth is that I have received an order from the Cloud Dragon Monarch. He needs a certain treasure within the flooding sea, and if you can help me acquire it, it'll surely please him greatly. I'm certain that he would be more than willing to listen to any request that you have for him. Whether you want to become his direct disciple or be conferred, it would all be within your grasp. The Cloud Dragon Monarch needs something? Really? Aren't god monarchs the strongest existences in the world, such that there is nothing that could move them? It's hard to believe that there's something in the world that they need. Can I really take your word for it? As long as we are able to find the treasure that the Cloud Dragon Monarch needs, he'll take us in as his direct disciple and even confer us?" Everyone was moved by what Ao Feng was proposing. The only thing they feared was that the god monarchs needed nothing. As long as there was something the god monarchs wanted, they would be able to catch their attention and please them. Then, it might really be possible for them to receive a conferment. "May I know what it is that the god monarch wants?" Someone amid the crowd asked. If it was too difficult to accomplish, such that they might even have to pay their life for it, there would be no point in doing it. The reason they wanted to be conferred was to lengthen their lifespan and obtain an even higher standing. It would all be meaningless if they lost their lives. What the God Monarch wants is a set of condensed earth essence on this land. Due to the concentrated spiritual energy harnessed within it, even someone of my prowess is unable to use it. Only God Monarchs would be able to assimilate it, Ao Feng said. However, there are some phantasmagoric spirits protecting the area, so I'm unable to enter it alone. I need your help to acquire it. Phantasmagoric spirits. They're a unique life form that thrive in areas rich in spiritual energy. They don't have a physical body, and their strength is roughly at the level of a god king, making them hard to deal with. I tried entering the area earlier, but I was stopped outside. However, if we put our strength together, we should be able to overcome their defense easily, Ao Feng said. If he could obtain the condensed earth essence by himself, there was no way he would have shared it with anyone else. However, despite being a conferred god king, he had found that it was impossible for him to accomplish this task on his own. Condensed earth essence. Zhong Xian's eyes lit up. He had read about it in the books in Kong Shi's house. Condensed earth essence boasted even purer spiritual energy than pinnacle god essence pills. If he could obtain it, there was a good chance that he could push for a breakthrough in his Zhenqi cultivation to conferred God King realm pinnacle in one shot. A God King amid the crowd asked, "How many phantasmagoric spirits are there? If it's too dangerous, I'll have to turn down your request. We would prefer to live our life peacefully in the days ahead." Live your life peacefully in the days ahead. Ao Feng sneered. Look at how the firmament has been faring in the past few decades. With the receding of spiritual energy, competition over cultivation resources is getting more and more intense. Putting aside rising to greater heights, I believe even sustaining your current level is posing to be a problem for most of you. Let me ask you one very direct question. How much longer do you think you have before your fortune runs out? The moment you run out of resources and your cultivation starts declining, what do you think your enemies who feared you in the past will do? Do you think that the powers that have backed you so far will continue to back you? Even if I don't say more, I think most of you should have already gotten my point. The crowd found themselves at a loss for words. Cultivation was like going against an upstream river, one could only either advance or regress. Even staying at the same spot would require a huge amount of cultivation resources. This was similar to how warriors had to train their bodies constantly in order to maintain their level of fitness. The firmament was facing an unprecedented shortage of resources, such that even god kings were having difficulties gathering sufficient resources to maintain their cultivation. Nearly all god kings had a massive clan backing them. Once they fell, their clans would fall apart as well. Everything that they had built up to date would fall apart. There's no way to live your life in peace in the current firmament. You either charge ahead and forge a path for yourself or else back down all the way till there's nothing left at all. It's that simple. Even I, as a conferred god king, am not spared from such a fate. Seeing how the crowd had gone silent from his words, Ao Feng changed his tone and sighed deeply before continuing. I'll be honest with you. Just 2 days ago, there was a battle above the moon, and the heaven subjugation monarch fell. What did you say? The heaven subjugation monarch has died. How did he die? Could it be the fight with God Monarch Lingxi? Is it even possible for a god monarch to die? Those words caused a huge commotion to erupt from the crowd. Kong Shi and Luo Ruoxin's battle had taken place on the moon, so other than the god monarchs and the conferred god kings close to them, there was hardly anyone who knew of the news. The ascension of the heaven subjugation monarch through the ranks had sparked the hopes of many ordinary cultivators. They felt like as long as they worked hard, it was possible for them to become spectacular existences like him. For this reason, the heaven subjugation monarch was the idol of many cultivators in the firmament, a figure whom many respected and looked up to. Many of them had actually been rooting for the heaven subjugation monarch's victory over god monarch Lingxi, but who could have known that he would actually lose his life? If even a god monarch could lose their life, as mere god kings, the situation seemed even more desperate for them. Just like that, the 11 god kings fell silent, and the atmosphere grew a little stifling. I'm not telling you all of this just to scare you, Ao Feng said. I am telling you that you need to become stronger in order to survive and protect your clan. The firmament before us is no longer the same peaceful firmament we knew. I won't deceive you. There's indeed some degree of danger when it comes to dealing with the phantasmagoric spirits, but as long as we put our strength together and coordinate well, I am confident that our chances of success exceed 90%. There is no better chance than this to turn things around. I have already offered you the opportunity, and it's your choice if you want to grasp it or not. We still need to think things through a little. Since that's the case, I'll offer another alternative to you all. Seeing that the crowd was still hesitating, Ao Feng added, as long as you are willing to come along with me, regardless of whether we are able to acquire the condensed earth essence or not, I'll give you a pinnacle god essence pill and owe you a favor as a token of my appreciation. Of course, I'm taking on quite some risk by making this offer, so after we receive the treasure, you need not think about receiving any reward from the god monarch. The crowd was stunned for a moment before their eyes glowed in delight. These 11 god kings were all unaffiliated cultivators. Some of them belonged to a sky, but they were not backed by any of the conferred god kings. As such, the cultivation resources they had on hand were relatively meager. A pinnacle god essence pill was a staggering fortune to them, and they could receive the favor of a conferred god king on top of that. These two were unconditional as long as they agreed to join the team to help him. On top of that, even though they wouldn't be able to ask a favor from the Cloud Dragon Monarch if they were to choose this alternative, it was still a good chance for them to catch the Cloud Dragon Monarch's attention and possibly win his goodwill. No matter how they looked at it, it didn't seem to be a bad deal to them. Alright, I'll agree to it then. I agree to it, too. The key difference between the two offers was that they would not have to fully commit themselves to obtaining the condensed earth essence. Even if they ended up retreating and the mission was a failure, they would still be entitled to the reward. This was a risk that they could afford to take. As a result, within just a minute, all 11 god kings had already made their decisions. Seeing how he had managed to get their agreement, Ao Feng heaved a sigh of relief internally as he turned to Zhongxian and Luo Chichi and asked, "What about the two of you?" "I'll agree to it as well." Zhongxian nodded. The condensed earth essence was useful to him, so he decided to join the group first before deciding what to do afterward. Great. With this, we have formally formed our alliance. From this point on, I have to emphasize that all of you must follow my instructions. I'll open the option for you to back out until we engage the enemy, but I don't expect you to abandon us during a critical period. As such an act could put the others at risk, I'll show no mercy against deserters, understood? Ao Feng said. We understand. The crowd nodded in response. Alright, let's go then. With the negotiations completed, Ao Feng led the way, and the group followed him closely. Soon enough, they arrived in the vicinity of a stream. The spiritual energy in the area was even more concentrated, and the lush greenery rose all the way into the air, blocking off the sky. Ao Feng pointed forward and said, "The phantasmagoric spirits are right ahead of us." The crowd turned their gazes over and saw white mist-like silhouettes drifting around the area. Those are plant spirits nurtured by the rich spiritual energy in the area, Zhongxian thought in realization. He had been wondering what the heck phantasmagoric spirits were, but it turned out to be just ancient trees and grass gaining consciousness as a result of the rich spiritual energy in the surroundings. It was rather similar to what had happened to the Pill King. While these spirits appeared to possess the strength of a god king, due to their limited means, their fighting prowess was extremely weak. However, what made them difficult to deal with was the sheer numbers they came in, such that it was easy to get overwhelmed by them. Furthermore, as beings that thrived on spiritual energy, they could be said to be indestructible in areas with such concentrated spiritual energy. That made them even more of a hassle to deal with. Our goal is to obtain the condensed earth essence and not pit our lives against those phantasmagoric spirits, Ao Feng said. Later, I want you to attack from all directions in order to attract the attention of the phantasmagoric spirits. I'll make use of the chaos to get in, and once I obtain the condensed earth essence, we'll leave right away. I think it's a good idea, But what if you run away after obtaining the condensed earth essence without telling us? A god king said. They had only just met one another, so it was hard for them to trust each other with their lives. Indeed. If you leave us in the lurch after obtaining the condensed earth essence, you'll be able to avoid paying us and returning the favor. That makes it very risky for us. I don't think that the plan is feasible, another god king added. What do you suggest then? Ao Feng frowned after hearing some opposition to what he had proposed. We'll advance and retreat as one, the god king from before exclaimed. Indeed. We'll advance and retreat as one. The rest of the crowd nodded in agreement. Such a course of action will indeed make it hard for us to turn against one another, but have you considered the possibility that we might be encircled by the phantasmagoric spirits? Ao Feng said. If that happens, not only will we be unable to obtain the condensed earth essence, we could very well lose our lives. Chapter 2244 Absorbing the Spirits. The crowd frowned upon hearing those words. There was some sense to what Ao Feng had said. There were a lot of phantasmagoric spirits around, and each of them possessed strength comparable to that of a god king. If they were trapped, not only would they be unable to obtain what they wanted, their team could very well be completely wiped out. Under such circumstances, they would surely have to sacrifice someone in order to break out of the encirclement, but given that they were strangers who were united by shared interests, who would be willing to give up their life to save the others? That was clearly asking the impossible. Taunting the phantasmagoric spirits and dividing their attention, this is the most viable solution we have at the moment. If you don't even trust me for that, what's the point of us working together? Ao Feng waved his hand in dissatisfaction. The crowd fell silent yet again. They might have only forged this alliance a moment ago, but if they weren't willing to trust the leader, it would be better for them to go their own ways. Why don't we practice a collaborative formation and force our way through the phantasmagoric spirits? A collaborative formation? First and foremost, the time we have in this area is severely limited. Second, it's only a matter of time before the other conferred god kings learn of the existence of the condensed earth essence. It will only complicate things if we spend too much time on building up a formation. Indeed. It would take at least half a month for all of us to master a collaborative formation and be in sync with one another. We don't have that much time to waste. If we had the time to do that, we'd be better off searching for other treasures around the area. We would be able to earn much more than a pinnacle god essence pill that way. The group devolved into an argument. They did not expect something that was supposed to be simple to have so many complications. At this rate, their team might just fall apart before the mission had even started. Fine, let's do this. I'll charge at the forefront, whereas the rest of you will take the flank to protect me from the attack of the phantasmagoric spirits. Is that fine? Having known that a group that was put together last minute would surely be unreliable, Ao Feng could only compromise. These god kings were hoping to obtain treasures without taking on any risks, but how could there be such a good thing in the world? That sounds fine with me. The crowd quickly agreed to Ao Feng's new plan. By this point, Ao Feng could not be bothered to plan out any additional strategies. Taking in a deep breath, he said, "Let's get to it then." Right after saying those words, he dashed ahead. Hula. Exerting the strength of a conferred god king, he flitted forth like a bolt of lightning. His hand morphed into a claw as he swiped it across the space ahead of him, jolting the phantasmagoric spirits ahead of him back into spiritual energy. "Follow me," Ao Feng bellowed. The remaining god kings quickly followed suit. Zhongxian and Luo Chichi stuck close to the crowd. It had to be said that Ao Feng was indeed quite powerful. He could defeat the God King realm phantasmagoric spirits with a single strike each, leaving nothing behind at all. Oh! These phantasmagoric spirits seem to be quite useful to my soul cultivation, Zhongxian thought as he blocked off the attacks coming from the phantasmagoric spirits coming from the sides. These phantasmagoric spirits were basically spirits, similar to the beings he had enchanted. He realized that if he absorbed them, it could augment his soul cultivation quite a bit. While his soul had reached conferred God King realm pinnacle after receiving the world's conferment, he still needed to reinforce his soul cultivation quite a bit before attempting for a breakthrough to the God Monarch realm. If he could assimilate these spirits, there was a good chance that he could reinforce his soul cultivation significantly. Let me give it a try. With such thoughts in mind, Zhongxian tried to absorb one of the spirits that Ao Feng had shattered into his glabella. If the spirit still had consciousness, absorbing it would be equivalent to possession, making it extremely troublesome to assimilate. However, the shattered spirits had already lost their consciousness, making them pure souls, which was extremely easy for Zhongxian to absorb. Right away, Zhongxian could sense his soul cultivation strengthening a fair bit, and his eyes lit up in excitement. Not bad. It was fortunate that he had chosen to join the group. Even if he failed to obtain the condensed earth essence in the end, it would still have been a fruitful trip for him. With Ao Feng charging at the forefront and 13 god kings blocking the phantasmagoric spirits by the side, there were a lot of dissipated spirits lingering in the area. Within just 10 minutes, Zhongxian could already sense his soul growing rapidly. But unknowingly, the group also ended up falling into the encirclement of the phantasmagoric spirits, just as Ao Feng had predicted. The mountain stream was filled with plants and herbs that had lived for countless years, and the surrounding conditions were ideal for nurturing phantasmagoric spirits. As a result, there were a large number around. Despite having fought for a while, the number of phantasmagoric spirits only seemed to continue to increase. Some time later, Zhongxian finally stopped absorbing the spirits. Over time, the effectiveness of absorbing the spirits gradually reduced, and finally, he reached a satiated state. At this point, he would need even purer spirits in order to further advance his soul cultivation. The condensed earth essence is right ahead, Ao Feng shouted as he continued charging forward. Turning his gaze ahead, Zhongxian saw a sphere of a milky white substance floating above a lake. It was only the size of a fist, but concentrated spiritual energy was rippling from it. The spiritual energy harnessed within the milky white substance was probably several times greater than in pinnacle god essence pills. Zhongxian could feel the zhenqi in his body pulsating in excitement, desiring to absorb it in. It's indeed good stuff. It'll be useful for me. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. Just as he had thought, if he consumed it, he should be able to push his zhenqi cultivation to conferred God-King realm intermediate stage or advanced stage easily. It was just that. He had been absorbing the spirits all this while and had not contributed much to the group. Given that Ao Feng and the other god kings had put so much effort into this, he felt embarrassed snatching it right away from them. After all, he was a master teacher, not a burglar. In any case, there were likely more than one of those spheres of condensed earth essence lying around the area, so he would just to look around the area later on. While others would have to forge a path through the phantasmagoric spirits in order to obtain the condensed earth essence, he did not have to go through so much effort. When it came down to it, he could simply draw out his soul and disguise it as a phantasmagoric spirit. This way, he should be able to easily slip through them and obtain the condensed earth essence with ease. Hong Long. As if to protect the condensed earth essence, the number of phantasmagoric spirits only continued to increase the closer they got to it. As a result, the pressure that the group was under increased exponentially. Within just a few minutes, there were 4 god kings who had sustained severe injuries, and even Ao Feng had blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. To make matters worse, the phantasmagoric spirits had grown much stronger. All of them had reached God King Realm Pinnacle, and they charged at the group fearlessly. Furthermore, they were extremely skilled at soul offense, causing the fighting prowess and morale of the group to be significantly reduced. At this rate, we might just lose our lives here, a god king cried out. Almost everyone in the group had a grim look on their face. They had thought that with so many of them putting their strength together, they should be able to overcome the phantasmagoric spirits with ease. Who could have known that they had underestimated the difficulty of the mission? We need to back out now, or else there's no way we'll be able to escape with our lives, another god king shouted. In that instant, all the members of the group began to hesitate should they retreat and abandon the mission or push on. Even though they were very close to the condensed earth essence, the pressure they faced was also growing with each passing second. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before they were wiped out. We have already come this far. How can we give up when we are already so close to the goal? Ao Feng bellowed ferociously. Everyone, just wait here for a moment for me. I'll fetch the condensed earth essence and come right back. With a furious roar, he began running forward, and all of a sudden, he began morphing into a massive golden dragon. With imposing momentum, he charged right toward the condensed earth essence in the air. He knew that he could not reach the goal in his human form, so he had transformed back to his original body without any hesitation. Chapter 2245 Get moving. With the appearance of the golden dragon, the surrounding air seemed to grow thin, and the spiritual energy in the surroundings became even more viscous. Aophong was displaying his true might as a conferred god king of the sky of Cloud Dragon. Wang. As soon as the golden dragon appeared, innumerable spirits in the surroundings began charging frenziedly toward him, even imploding themselves in order to deal some damage to him. In an instant, layers of spatial ripples diffused into the surroundings, destabilizing the space in the vicinity. Under the relentless attacks of the phantasmagoric spirits, his resilient scales tore apart, and several glaring gashes were inflicted all over his body. His golden dragon blood dripped to the floor and crushed the rocks beneath with a sizzling sound. Who? Knowing that he was in a desperate situation, Aophong did not hesitate to use his dragon breath, dissipating the dozens of phantasmagoric spirits that stood in his way. That opened a temporary passageway for him to pass through. Su. Aophong quickly made use of the opportunity to dash forward, and just as he was about to reach the condensed earth essence, a light barrier suddenly appeared in front of him, blocking him out. It's a formation created by the phantasmagoric spirit. Aophong's face darkened as he felt goosebumps rising all over his body. Not only did these phantasmagoric spirits possess sentience, they were even able to collaborate with one another to set up a formation. This far exceeded his expectations. Aophong quickly lifted his claws to smash a hole through the light barrier. The light barrier wavered under Aophong's strike, but it did not shatter. Even with someone as powerful as Aophong exerting his full might, he was still unable to tear down the formation before him easily. I don't believe it. Aophong could not accept letting the condensed earth essence slip through his fingers when it was right before him. No matter what, he was determined to make the mission a success. Otherwise, once word began to spread about the dangers that lurked there, it would be difficult for him to gather a new team. In other words, he only had this one shot at success, and failure was not acceptable. However, he also knew that he did not have much time left. With every second that he was stalled there, his group members would be facing even greater pressure from the phantasmagoric spirits. Boom boom boom. Aophong swiped his claws and tail repeatedly on the light barrier, causing it to tremor non-stop. Yet, he was simply unable to break it apart. But while it was still refusing to shatter, it grew considerably thinner under his furious offense. With each strike, a fair bit of the spiritual energy that made up the light barrier diffused into the surroundings. Observing that scene, Zhongxian's eyes lit up in excitement. It's not a formation but a cocoon formed out of the purest essence extracted from innumerable phantasmagoric spirits. At first glance, it did appear to be a barrier, but based on how the energy was leaking outward with each strike, it was apparently not the case. If he was not mistaken, the reason the plants in the area were able to birth spirits was due to the presence of the condensed earth essence in the area. For this reason, the spirits viewed the condensed earth essence as their mother. In order to protect their mother, the phantasmagoric spirits extracted the essence from their spirits and accumulated it over time in order to form this protective layer of defense. In other words, the light barrier was actually an incredible tonic for him. If I absorb that, I should be able to advance my soul cultivation considerably, right? With such a thought in mind, he quickly smacked away the two phantasmagoric spirits charging at him before moving closer to the light barrier. Indeed, he could sense the spirit essence that had diffused from the light barrier lingering in the air. His soul cultivation grew significantly just by absorbing a sliver of it. This confirmed Zhongxian's thoughts. If he could absorb all of it, he would surely be able to bring his soul cultivation to new height. It would be foolish to miss out on such good stuff. He turned his eyes toward the light barrier, only to see the barrier being torn off layer after layer by Aophong's relentless attacks. The concentrated soul energy was then absorbed by the phantasmagoric spirits in the area, strengthening them. What a pity! At this rate, The pressure on their side would only continue to increase as the phantasmagoric spirits grew stronger. Besides, it was such a huge waste to give such tonics to the phantasmagoric spirits when they were hardly alive. If he could have it instead, the benefit he gained from it would be even greater than consuming the condensed earth essence. This won't do. I should just take it for myself, Zhongxian thought as he walked over to the light barrier. Boom, boom, boom. Meanwhile, the golden dragon in the air was still striking the light barrier relentlessly, and the rebound from striking too hard was causing its claws to bleed profusely. At the same time, the phantasmagoric spirits in the area were still attacking him from all directions, causing his injuries to pile up. It felt like he would succumb very soon and fall from the sky. Ao Feng clenched his teeth tightly as he thought, I am deeply indebted to the Cloud Dragon Monarch. The condensed earth essence is something that can allow the Cloud Dragon Monarch to further his cultivation, so no matter what, I must complete this mission. Most of the conferred god kings had received guidance from their god monarchs, and in the northern, eastern, western, and southern skies, the conferred god kings were all related by bloodline to the god monarch. This meant that their relationship ran even deeper. If the god monarch needed something, even if it was at the cost of their life, they would still find it for them. Ao Feng continued to attack frenziedly, but the stronger his strikes were, the greater the rebound was. It did not take long for his body to be nearly completely tattered, and it looked as if he was on the verge of collapsing. Ao Feng knew that he had reached the limit of his body, and if he pushed on like that, he would die before he could lay his hands on the condensed earth essence. Feeling utterly helpless, he was just about to give the order to retreat when he saw a young man standing in front of the light barrier that he had been hitting a moment ago. With a gleeful smile on his face, the young man started to absorb the diffused energy of the light barrier. Lowering his dragon head, Ao Feng soon recognized who the young man was. It was one of the last two god kings whom he had recruited. Pay no heed to me. You can continue if you want. I'll just absorb a bit before leaving, the young man said with a friendly wave of his hand. Ao Feng nearly blacked out. Bro. I nearly got killed by the phantasmagoric spirits while trying to get to this light barrier. Even now, my body is still bleeding profusely. How did you get here without the slightest crease on your clothes? You are even in the mood to smile and wave at me. Damn it, I am already dying. If you had such capabilities, why didn't you just use them earlier? Ao Feng glared at the young man with an aggrieved look, only to see the young man completely focused on absorbing the energy scattered all around. He was so focused that a small tornado of energy started to form around his body. Two of the largest phantasmagoric spirits in the area sensed that the source of their strength was being absorbed by the young man, and they began charging over while screeching in fury. Be careful! Ao Feng shouted out. But before the phantasmagoric spirits could get close, the young man waved his hand casually. Peng! Peng! With two dull thuds, the phantasmagoric spirits were reduced to dust before being absorbed by the young man as well. The young man suddenly raised his head once more to look at Ao Feng once more, and he said in an earnest tone, There's no need to be bothered by me. You can continue scratching at the light barrier. It's already very thin now. If you hurry, you should be able to break it within 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Ao Feng spurted a mouthful of blood. He had been thinking that he could break it soon, but in the end, 10 minutes. Despite putting his life on the line and attacking desperately, he had not even ground away a tenth of the light barrier. What the hell? Was this even possible to break apart? While wallowing in his sorrow, Ao Feng lowered his head once more, only to see that the young man had finished devouring all the energy lingering in the area. Seeing that there was nothing anymore, the young man raised his head to direct a dissatisfied look in his direction, asking, Why are you standing there in a daze? Get moving. Ah! Without any thought, Ao Feng's claws began striking the light barrier once more, causing its energy to scatter in the surroundings. Zhongxian nodded in satisfaction before turning his attention back to absorbing the spirit essence around him. Chapter 2246 Exasperation. Absorbing the spirit essence contained within the light barrier, Zhongxian's soul became stronger and stronger. At the same time, his control over his soul energy grew more refined. It did not take long for his soul cultivation to reach satiation once more. However, There was nothing to worry about. With a thought, he redirected the spirit essence toward his clone, strengthening its soul. He soon absorbed everything that could be absorbed. Raising his head once more, he saw Ao Feng floating in the air with a blooded body like a slain dragon. It felt like the other party had really used up all his strength. He did not look as imposing as he did before. I have a pill here that can heal your stamina. Eat it. With a flick of his finger, Zhongxian threw a pill over to Ao Feng. If the other party really fainted, he would not be able to absorb the spirit essence around peacefully anymore. Besides, given how much he had absorbed earlier, it was only right for him to repay the favor. My injuries are too severe. Ordinary pills won't work, Ao Feng said with a bitter smile. Even pinnacle god essence pills were not of much use to him, let alone some low-tier pills. Given the extent of his injuries, he would require at least a purer dragon bloodline in order to recover. Just give it a try, Zhongxian said with a smile. He had infused his pathos of heaven junchi and a bit of little chick's blood into the high-tier god essence pill he had flicked over. That should be more than enough to heal up ordinary injuries. Seeing the young man insisting on the matter, Ao Feng suddenly recalled how the young man was able to pass through the phantasmagoric spirits in order to get to it. Perhaps in the hope that a miracle would happen, he opened his mouth and swallowed it. As soon as he swallowed the pill, a warm flow spread across his whole body and healed his injuries. This. Ao Feng narrowed his eyes in shock. The effects of the pill were already comparable to a god monarch realm pill. To be willing to give away such a valuable pill so casually. Just who in the world was this young man? Lowering his head, he saw the young man waving his hand calmly, saying, "You can get back to work now." Ao Feng's eyebrows danced up and down. Just like that, the gratitude he felt for the young man vanished like a puff of smoke. "Aren't you treating me like your slave?" Ao Feng looked around him and saw that most of the god kings he had brought in were already injured, and their formation was on the verge of collapsing. Knowing that this was not the time to be fussing over this, he gritted his teeth and continued striking the light barrier furiously. Catcher! Catcher! The light barrier shuddered, and spirit essence began diffusing into the surroundings once more. Zhongxian absorbed for a while longer before he began frowning in dissatisfaction once more. As his clone had neither comprehended the pathos of heaven nor received the world's conferment, he needed a greater amount of soul energy than Zhongxian. Initially, he did not really think much of it. However, the more he absorbed the spirit essence, the more frustrated he felt with how slow the rate at which the spirit essence was being produced. The rate of how fast one cultivated did make a huge difference. If one's rate of cultivation was too slow, it would be hard to gather enough momentum to push for a breakthrough. Why do I have to wait for Ao Feng to strike the spirit essence from the light barrier before absorbing it? Why can't I just absorb it straight from the light barrier? Zhongxian thought. Looking at how exhausted Ao Feng was, to the extent that his tongue was stuck out like a tired dog, Zhongxian knew that it would be impossible to get him to pick up his speed. So, he turned his gaze toward the cocoon-like light barrier in the sky instead. It would indeed be easier to absorb the diffused spirit essence from the light barrier, but since the output could not keep up with the rate of consumption, it was time to make some modifications to the plan. If only he had known that Ao Feng was such a lousy worker, he never would have given the latter the pill. What a waste of resources. It seemed like conferred god kings were not as formidable as he had thought. Shaking his head, Zhongxian moved over to the light barrier and attempted to absorb the spirit essence in it. However, the exterior was so hard that he could not absorb it at all. Ah, that explains why that fellow isn't able to break it. This light barrier is indeed scarily resilient. He raised his fist and gave the light barrier a good, hard punch, but the rebound from striking a hard surface caused his arm to go numb instead. The light barrier formed from the purest essence of the plant spirits was more frightening than he had thought. Even though he did not use his soul cultivation in the attack, no matter what, his physical body had still gone through the tempering of the deathless lava reservoir. In terms of sheer strength, the amount of force he could dish out was far greater than that of other conferred god kings. Yet, even with such strength, he still suffered a rebound that caused his hand to ache. It seemed like one would at least require the powers of a god monarch in order to swiftly breach the light barrier. Let me try with a weapon then. Since his fist did not work, Zhongxian quickly drew the Crimson Heaven sword that the god monarch of the sword hut had given him back then. Who? The wind batters unceasingly on the unwilling tree, a son seeks to be filial but time slips past his grasp. Zhongxian executed the pathos of Heaven 4 Dan sword art. Puha! The light barrier in front did not even manage to hold its ground for a split second before a huge hole was ripped in it. Caught off guard, Zhongxian ended up stumbling inside the light barrier. This. Zhongxian blinked blankly. As his fist did not work earlier, he had expected it to take a great deal of effort to break the light barrier even if he used his swordsmanship. To his astonishment, he managed to tear a hole in it so easily. If only he had known that it was that easy, he would not have wasted his time. At the same time, Zhongxian could not help but wonder just what tier of weapon the Crimson Heaven sword was. Was it not way too sharp? Placing his sword back into his storage ring, Zhongxian began absorbing the spirit essence once more, and this time around, he could feel concentrated energy streaming ceaselessly into his body rapidly. Just as I thought. It's much more convenient absorbing the spirit essence from inside. He could hardly absorb anything while he was out there, but in here, the spirit essence flowed so easily into his body that he really wondered what he had been doing the past few minutes. Channeling the spirit essence toward the clone in his storage ring, his clone's soul cultivation quickly rose through the ranks, causing his fighting prowess to rise swiftly. Peng peng peng. While Zhongxian was absorbing the spirit essence from the inside, Ao Feng was still striking the light barrier with all his might. Dragon blood was dripping from his claws, and his nails had blunted as a result of smashing against something absurdly hard. Just as he was thinking of giving up once more, he suddenly noticed that the young man from before had already slipped in and was standing inside quietly, not moving at all. Once again, Ao Feng felt a sweet sensation at the back of his throat, and he nearly spurted blood. Brew, when the hell did you get in there? Why didn't you call for me? Did you not see how I was striking the light barrier with all my might? Are you making fun of me? It's as if I was searching the entire house for my keys, but it turned out that they were with you all along. Ao Feng quickly circled around the light barrier and found the tear that the young man entered through. Without any hesitation, he charged right through the tear, and he got stuck. After struggling for a long time, he finally transmogrified back to his human form before entering. Condensed earth essence, it's finally within my grasp. Paying no heed to the young man who was still standing motionless, Ao Feng rushed straight for the condensed earth essence and grabbed it. TZZZ. Feeling the incredible energy pulsating within the milky white sphere, Ao Feng trembled in agitation. He was just about to find a container to store it when he suddenly noticed something and frowned. This is weird. Why does it seem like the condensed earth essence has shrunk quite a bit? When I saw it earlier, it was still the size of a grown man's fist. So, why does it look like a mere ping-pong ball now? While Ao Feng was still trying to figure out the mystery of the missing essence, the condensed earth essence in his hand continued to shrink, becoming the size of a grape before further miniaturizing to the size of a bean. Ao Feng grasped at his hair as he felt like something within him was going to explode. If I give this little bean to the Cloud Dragon Monarch, the latter will surely think that I'm mocking him. The heck? Chapter 2247. Venturing along the mountain stream, scratching his head in utter confusion, Ao Feng took a closer look, only to realize that the energy within the condensed earth essence in his hand, after the shattering of the light barrier, was flowing outward ceaselessly. It appeared that the light barrier had been created to prevent the condensed earth essence from diffusing, and its destruction resulted in the inability of the condensed earth essence to maintain its form. Wait, so where did the spiritual energy go? Ao Feng thought anxiously. Tracing the flow of spiritual energy, the result of his investigation made his body stagger from shock. To his disbelief, both the light barrier and the spiritual energy from the condensed earth essence were being absorbed by the young man. That fellow was leaving no scraps at all. But, how was the young man doing it? The spiritual energy of the condensed earth essence was so pure that even Ao Feng himself would have difficulty absorbing it. Gritting his teeth, Ao Feng quickly took out a jade container to store the bean-sized condensed earth essence before sealing it off. Then, He furiously turned his gaze to Zhongxian and confronted him. "Friend, I am thankful to you for your pill earlier, but what do you mean by absorbing the spiritual energy in the condensed earth essence? What do you expect me to present to his sovereignty after all you have done?" While he was grateful to Zhongxian for helping him earlier, the main purpose of their mission was to obtain the condensed earth essence. If the young man had sucked it dry, it would have meant that their mission was a failure. "Do you know how much I have sacrificed in order to complete this mission? Not only did I promise everyone a pinnacle god essence pill and a favor, I even nearly lost my life in the midst of the mission. Yet, you stole the spoils of war right before my eyes. Isn't that a bit too much?" Perplexed by Ao Feng's suddenly outburst, Zhongxian turned to look at the jade container and realized that there was less than a tenth of the condensed earth essence left. Taken aback, he quickly looked at his own body before freezing on the spot. "Ah! My cultivation has reached conferred God King. When did it happen?" This was shocking. Even though it was only a cultivation stage, he had still managed to raise his cultivation from God King Realm Pinnacle to conferred God King Realm Primary stage. Why did he not notice anything? He must have been so focused on absorbing the spirit essence that his body subconsciously started cultivating on its own under the effects of the mind of void. As a result, he ended up absorbing the condensed earth essence involuntarily. "If I were to tell you that I'm here only to absorb the spirit essence and not to take your spiritual energy, would you believe me?" Zhongxian at least knew enough to know that Ao Feng would beat him to death if he said those words, so he scratched his head awkwardly and replied, I honestly didn't mean for this to happen, and I'll give you an explanation later. For the time being, let's head out. I'm afraid that they won't be able to hold on for much longer." Ao Feng turned around and saw that the God Kings were indeed at their limits. Just a moment later, and they would have succumbed to the phantasmagoric spirits. Having their condensed earth essence taken away had caused the phantasmagoric spirits to fall into a greater state of rage, resulting in their attacks being far more violent than before. All 11 of the God Kings had already sustained severe injuries, so the wise thing to do right now was indeed to retreat. Humph! Knowing that this was indeed not a good time to question the young man, Ao Feng gritted his teeth and leaped out of the light barrier. His body morphed once more into a massive golden dragon, and he wrapped the crowd around his body before dashing off. He knew that the young man inside the light barrier possessed strength beyond him, so he could not be bothered with escorting him out with them as well. "I'll be waiting for you outside," Ao Feng said to Zhongxian via Zhenqi telepathy. Zhongxian shook his head before focusing his attention back on absorbing the concentrated spirit essence around him. 5 minutes later, he was finally done absorbing the entire spirit essence, and his clone had also managed to advance its strength to God King Realm Pinnacle. With that, his clone would be able to match any conferred God King with ease. But at the same time, with the erosion of the light barrier, Zhongxian was immediately swarmed by hordes of phantasmagoric spirits. He swung the Crimson Heaven sword in his hand to open a pathway for himself to retreat, but all of a sudden, he halted his footsteps. "Should I head deeper in to see if there's more condensed earth essence around?" Since he was already there, if he could find more condensed earth essence, he might just be able to push for a breakthrough to conferred God King Realm Pinnacle while returning what he owed Ao Feng. So, he quickly activated the disguise amulet to alter his aura to appear to be no different from that of the phantasmagoric spirits in the surroundings. Initially, the phantasmagoric spirits were attacking him relentlessly, but slowly, their movements came to a halt as they scanned their surroundings in confusion. Plant spirits possessed only an elementary level of sentience, so they were unable to process complex situations. Zhongxian's disguise was nearly flawless, so not even they were able to tell the difference between him and their own kind. "The disguise amulet is truly formidable," Zhongxian muttered as he quickly rushed alongside the mountain stream. There had to be something along this mountain stream that the rest of this land did not have for it to be able to produce the condensed earth essence. Trailing ahead, the number of phantasmagoric spirits in the area gradually began to decrease. A moment later, Zhongxian came to a halt as he scanned the area right in front of him warily with a frown. For some reason, he could sense a very familiar aura coming from there. It was a sensation similar to what he had felt from the grey energy in the abyss beneath the sky of spirit origin, which wielded the ability to neutralize his heaven's path Zhenqi. This is weird. The further Zhongxian proceeded, the stronger the aura became. Eventually, it reached a point where even conferred god kings would be unable to withstand it. Zhongxian had to wrap the pathos of heaven's Zhenqi around his body in order to remain unaffected. He continued flying for around 10 minutes before he finally arrived at the bottommost area of the mountain stream. Glancing downward, he felt his heart skip a beat. The bottommost area of the mountain stream was a massive plot of empty land spanning over an area of tens of thousands of mu. There were no plants or any life at all on this plot of land, only a huge depression in the ground. Zhongxian was unable to see anything while standing on the ground, so he flew into the air to get a bird's-eye view over the area. He soon realized that the depression in the ground was actually a humongous palm print. Was this left behind by a god monarch? Zhongxian frowned. Even with his current strength, he would not be able to execute such a powerful palm strike. That could only mean that the palm print was left behind by a god monarch. There was just one problem with that. The god monarchs were unable to enter this area. If so, how did that person leave this palm print? Looking at the humongous palm print beneath him, a thought surfaced in Zhongxian's mind. Could it be that the rift in the sky of the firmament was caused by a battle? The flooding sea carried a great resemblance to the missing piece from the sky of the firmament, and if he thought about it, the abyss beneath Spirit Origin Royal City did resemble a palm print as well. If so, could the rift and the abyss have been caused by a battle between two god monarchs? Perhaps the fight had gotten out of hand, such that it resulted in Little Chick's demise in the end. But if that was the case, as the strongest god monarch of the firmament, Luo Ruoxin should have intervened and halted the battle, especially if it was causing such massive damage to the world. Why did she not do so? Just what happened in the past 4 to 5 decades of the firmament? Why would the heavens be fragmented into multiple pieces, falling all the way to the master-teacher continent to enter his and Kongsha's bodies? The many questions in Zhongxian's mind made him become more and more confused. Circling around the palm print, Zhongxian was not able to find any condensed earth essence in the area, and there was nothing that looked particularly amiss to him. So, he could only heave a deep sigh and head back to where Aofeng and the others were. While he did not manage to advance his Zhenqi cultivation all the way to conferred God King realm pinnacle, at the very least, he did manage to overcome his bottleneck as a god king. At the same time, his soul had also grown significantly stronger. He was no longer far away from becoming a god monarch. All in all, he had earned quite a lot from this journey. The only issue was that he had no idea how he should face Aofeng. The latter had rallied their group together for the sake of obtaining the condensed earth essence, but he had ended up absorbing more than 90% of it. That made him feel deeply embarrassed. Forget it. If it doesn't work out, I should just take him in as my disciple. Though, I must say, he doesn't look like a brilliant kid. Zhongxian murmured hesitantly. This was the greatest compromise he could bring himself to make. Chapter 2248 Betrayal. Having made up his mind, Zhongxian quickly headed back to where Aofeng and the rest were. Due to his disguise, the raging phantasmagoric spirits did not recognize him as an intruder and attack him. Soon enough, he arrived back at the mountain forest. He was still thinking of how delighted Aofeng would be after relaying his intentions to the latter when he suddenly felt shockwaves diffusing from the area ahead of him. Dashing forward, he saw that Aofeng, as a golden dragon, was currently brawling with a ferocious tiger. Aofeng, it has only been a few days since we last met, but why does it seem like you have weakened a lot? If the others saw you in your current state, they would probably laugh their teeth out, the tiger roared in laughter. Two forces clashed relentlessly against one another like fireworks in the sky, causing brilliant flashes of light to appear here and there. A conferred god king of the sky of adamant gold? Zhongxian frowned. The ferocious tiger was likely a conferred god king of the sky of adamant gold, but it was just a little weird how they suddenly came to blows with one another. You be *****. Aofeng roared as he activated a secret art that caused his entire body to glow scarlet. Once again, he dashed furiously toward the tiger. Boom boom boom. Under the collision of the two blows, Dimension rifts appeared all around the area. Zhongsha! Luo Chichi called out as she walked over to Zhongshen's side. She knew that he had something to do earlier, so she had chosen to leave the mountain stream together with Ao Feng earlier so as to not slow him down. What's going on? Why would the two of them suddenly fight one another? Zhongshen asked. Shortly after we came out earlier, conferred God King Hu Xiao of the Sky of Adamant Gold suddenly stopped us. I reckon that he probably knows that about the condensed earth essence as well, so he intentionally camped outside to snatch it from the wounded Ao Feng, Luo Chichi told him. I see. Zhongshen nodded in realization. What all cultivators had to be most wary of in the flooding sea were not the natural traps nor the spatial turbulence but their peers. There were plenty of people who would lie in ambush, waiting for someone else to brave danger to obtain the treasure they wanted before assaulting them and stealing the fruit of their labor. It seemed like that was exactly what the conferred God King known as Hu Xiao was doing. If not for Ao Feng's injuries, he should have been more than a match for Hu Xiao, but in his current state, things don't seem to look too optimistic. Luo Chichi shook her head. If not for Ao Feng sustaining severe injuries from the relentless attacks from the phantasmagoric spirits earlier, no matter how formidable Hu Xiao was, he would only be equal to him at the very most. Unfortunately, Ao Feng was not in a good condition, so the result of the duel was determined right from the very start. Boom! A deafening sonic boom exploded in the air, and Ao Feng plummeted from the sky. His massive body was filled with wounds, and golden blood flowed profusely from his body, creating huge craters beneath him. Zhongshen hesitated for a brief moment before he began collecting the dragon blood that was leaking all over the area. The blood of a conferred God King pure-blooded dragon should be able to sell for a decent price. Hu Xiao transmogrified into a middle-aged man as he demanded with a wintry voice, "Hand over the condensed earth essence." Ao Feng gritted his teeth indignantly. You know how many conferred God Kings died in the previous flood of spiritual energy. Don't push your luck. Hu Xiao harumphed as he took a step forward toward Ao Feng. Knowing that the other party would not hesitate to make a move against him over the condensed earth essence, Ao Feng could only reluctantly hand a jade container over. Hu Xiao caught the jade container and pried open its lid to check the contents. A moment later, he asked with a deep frown, "Why is it so small?" Given how many phantasmagoric spirits there were around the mountain stream, the condensed earth essence should have been a decent size. It was unimaginable that it would only be the size of a mere bean. The energy probably leaked out earlier while I was breaking the barrier around it. It was already this big when I first laid my hands on it, Ao Feng replied, not revealing what had happened with Zhongshen earlier. Leaked out? Hu Xiao frowned. He kept the condensed earth essence into his storage ring before directing his eyes back to Ao Feng. Since that's the case, I'll just take something of yours in order to make up for it then. With a flick of his finger, the storage ring on Ao Feng's finger immediately flew into Hu Xiao's grasp. He tapped on it lightly to clear away the soul imprint before taking a look at the items within. His lips crept up in delight as he remarked, "Not bad. You have done well this time. It looks like you have been working hard since entering the flooding sea. I'll be taking all of this." Since he was already there to rob Ao Feng, there was no reason for him to leave anything behind for the latter. While the items inside Ao Feng's storage ring could not begin to compare to the condensed earth essence, it was still highly beneficial for conferred God Kings. Seeing how all his possessions were taken away by the other party, Ao Feng gritted his teeth furiously, but he could not say a word. This was simply how the flood of spiritual energy was. If one lowered one's guard for a moment, a plunderer would appear to snatch one's items. If he fought with Hu Xiao over this, there was a good chance that the latter might just kill him, so he had no choice but to tolerate it. As long as he was alive, he could always earn those cultivation resources back. After snatching Ao Feng's items, Hu Xiao turned his gaze toward the other God Kings in the group. The same goes for the rest of you. Hand over your stuff. I might still hesitate a little before Ao Feng due to the backing of the Sky of Cloud Dragon, but I can't say that the same goes for the rest of you. If you don't wish to die, you'd better make a move fast. His voice was laced with threat. The Sky of Cloud Dragon was known to be excessively protective of their kind, and Aophone was a conferred god king on top of that. As long as Aophone was willing to obediently hand his stuff over, there was no reason for Hu Xiao to risk killing Aophone only to have the Cloud Dragon monarch exact vengeance on him. However, the other god kings did not have the same backing as Aophone. Even if he killed a couple of god kings, there would be no one to fault him for his actions. Facing the pressure from Hu Xiao, the injured god kings glared at him indignantly, but there was nothing he could do. They might have tried to escape if they were not injured, but in their current state, there was no way they could outrun a conferred god king. If they did not hand over their possession, there was a good chance that the other party would do them all in. God kings might be highly respected figures in the firmament, but in the flooding sea, they were nothing at all. Here. I have only collected these. Soon, the god kings had handed over all the storage rings with them. Looking at their harvest, Hu Xiao nodded in contentment. Just as he was about to continue speaking, a god king suddenly gritted his teeth, stepped forward, and said, "Conferred God King Hu Xiao, I am willing to serve you if you could return my treasures. I can tell what happened in the mountain stream that caused the condensed earth essence to disappear. You wish to become my follower? That's not completely out of the question, but that depends on whether the news you have to offer is worth your life and the treasures you have," Hu Xiao said nonchalantly. "You will be pleased with what I have to offer," the god king said with a glint in his eyes before pointing toward Zhongxian. It was that fellow. He was the one who reached the condensed earth essence first, and it was the size of a palm when he entered. However, shortly after he entered, the condensed earth essence grew smaller and smaller till it reached its current size. I believe that he's the culprit behind the disappearance of the condensed earth essence. That fellow possessed the strength to deal with the phantasmagoric spirits, but he had watched idly as they got injured, and he had even run to the light barrier to steal the condensed earth essence. To be honest, he had been extremely annoyed and dissatisfied with the young man for some time. Through this, not only would he be able to teach the young man a lesson, he would also be able to keep his treasures. It would be killing two birds with one stone. "You are the one who stole the condensed earth essence." Hearing that the condensed earth essence had actually been the size of a fist previously, Hu Xiao assessed Zhongxian with narrowed eyes. If he could obtain the condensed earth essence from the other party and present it to God Monarch Fuming, he would surely be able to win the God Monarch's favor. Chapter 2249 I always repay my debt. I have come here with conferred God King Aophone in order to obtain the condensed earth essence, and I didn't have any intention of taking it for myself. It was an accident that led to this. With Aophone, who was lying on the floor, looking his way as well, Zhongxian awkwardly explained himself. He had thought about it for a while, but he still felt a little embarrassed talking about it. After all, the fault was on him. Seeing the young man admit to it, Hu Xiao burst into laughter. "It looks like I have really struck gold this time." With cold eyes carrying unquestionable authority, Hu Xiao demanded, "Hand the condensed earth essence over right now, and I can spare you from death." "I can't," Zhongxian replied nonchalantly. He had already absorbed it into his body, so how could he present it to the other party? If he could, he would have already returned it to Aophone. "Look here. The reason I am still talking to you right now is because I am in a good mood. If you keep pushing your luck, I can just loot the condensed earth essence from you after killing you." Despite Hu Xiao's threat, Zhongxian maintained the same nonchalant look on his face. This truly angered Hu Xiao, such that he raised his palm and struck down on Zhongxian, creating a massive palm print in the sky. Catcher! A burst of force swept all over the surroundings as the palm print swiftly descended upon Zhongxian. Seeing how Hu Xiao had made his move, the God King who had just offered himself to serve as Hu Xiao's subordinate raised his head with a smug look on his face. "You should learn your place. Do you think that we are still in the firmament, where everyone has to follow rules?" They were in the flooding sea, a place known to be the graveyard of God Kings and conferred God Kings. Yet, the young man still dared to act so conceited. Such actions were no different from courting death. Facing Hu Xiao's attack, Zhongxian shook his head helplessly and lamented, "Is there a need for us to do this?" These God Kings were just strangers whom he had met, so he did not feel any obligation to protect them. "I can turn a blind eye to you robbing them, but don't you think it's too much for you to rob and make a move on me?" Zhongxian raised his hand and flicked his finger. Voila! The massive palm print in the sky shattered like glass, and before Hu Xiao could even react, he was already struck square on his glabella, and he flew dozens of meters before crashing heavily onto the ground. Huge mouthfuls of blood coughed out from his mouth. Conferred God King Hu Xiao's attack was undone with a single flick, and he was even sent flying on top of that. Am I seeing things? The God Kings in the area shuddered in fright at what they had just witnessed. Even Aofeng's bell-like eyes were widened in shock. His body was trembling so much that he looked more like a gutless python than a massive dragon from afar. From how the young man was able to travel among the phantasmagoric spirits and break open the light barrier, he knew that the young man was not an ordinary individual. But who could have known that he was so powerful? He would have difficulty subduing Hu Xiao even if he was at his peak, but such a formidable opponent turned out to be nothing more than an ant in the eyes of the young man. Was he not just a god king? Hu Xiao struggled to his feet as he glared sharply at Zhongxian with bloodshot eyes. How could he, as a conferred god king, be severely injured with a single strike from an ordinary god king? He could not have imagined such a thing in the past. Even though he did not put his full strength behind the earlier attack, the fact that the young man was able to overpower his palm strike so easily meant that he was stronger than most conferred god kings that he knew of. Damn you! Cursing loudly, Hu Xiao morphed his palm into a claw and swiped down at Zhongxian, exerting a might comparable to the weight of the mountains. Seeing that Hu Xiao was still persistently coming after him, Zhongxian shook his head before placing his hands behind his back. Hu! Before the swipe could even land, the force was suddenly dispersed in midair. Following that, a cold harumph sounded. This is the last time I'll let you off for daring to raise your hands against me. A series of spatial ripples swiftly appeared in the air, and Hu Xiao, who had still been striking ferociously a moment ago, had already fled into the distance. As soon as his strike was dispersed, he had realized that he was no match for the young man. So, without any hesitation, he had turned tail and fled. In the flood of spiritual energy, the ones who were able to obtain treasures and walk out with their lives intact were the true victors. As for his reputation and the like, that was of secondary importance. After all, given Hu Xiao's standing in the firmament, who would dare talk CR*P about him? Besides, who would believe such words? Zhongsha! Luo Chichi called out. She knew that Zhongxian could have stopped Hu Xiao from fleeing, so she was perplexed as to why he did not stop him. It matters not. None of us were injured anyway, Zhongxian said with a wave of his hand. His current priority should be to raise his cultivation and push for a breakthrough to the god-monarch realm. Conferred god kings no longer meant anything to him anymore, and they were not worth his time. But, he stole Aofeng's treasures. If you retrieved them for him, you would have been able to even out the debt from the condensed earth essence, Luo Chichi replied. Having been together for quite some time, she had come to understand Zhongxian's character. He was not a person who liked to owe a debt to others. If he felt that he owed someone a debt, he would try to repay that person in his own way. That was also why he had felt so awkward earlier when he was asked if he was the one who had taken the condensed earth essence. Given what had just happened, this was indeed an ideal opportunity to repay the debt he owed to Aofeng. If he could exact vengeance on Aofeng's behalf while getting his stuff back, he would be able to even the scales. This way, he would not have to feel awkward around Aofeng. And those words made Zhongxian's eyes light up. He had been so caught up in trying to figure out how to stop Aofeng from fainting from happiness when he offered to take the latter in as his student that he completely failed to consider such a possibility. If he resolved the issue in such a manner, he would not have to take the other party in as his student anymore. What a relief! With such a thought in mind, Zhongxian glanced in the direction that Hu Xiao had escaped in, only to see that he had completely disappeared from sight. It's already too late. He's gotten away, Luo Chichi said with a bitter smile. While conferred god kings were incapable of teleportation, the speed of their movements was almost as good as that. Hu Xiao had already run away for 7 to 8 breaths, so it would be nigh impossible to track and catch up with him anymore. It's not too late yet, Zhongxian replied with a smile. He raised his hand and reached forward. At the same time, the space in front of him began distorting. As if layers of paper had been compressed together, a distance of several hundred li was suddenly pressed together, allowing Zhongxian's arm to stretch over this long distance to grab his target. What? How is this possible? With a cry of agony, Hu Xiao was pulled over to where Zhongxian and the others were before being slammed heavily onto the ground. Seeing such a sight, Ao Feng's mouth fell open. Compressing space in order to capture someone, this was supposed to be a feat that only god monarchs were able to pull off. Was the young man before him actually a god monarch in disguise? Hu Xiao was also on the verge of losing his mind. He had thought that he should be safe after flying so far away, but who could have known that the other party would be able to grab him so easily? Even grabbing a fly would have been harder than this. I just remembered that you haven't returned what you stole from them. Take out everything you have, Zhongxian said as he glanced down at Hu Xiao with an impassive look on his face. Having received the world conferment and absorbed a great deal of spirit essence earlier, his soul was already strong enough to manipulate the spatial laws of the firmament. Even though Hu Xiao had escaped beyond his line of sight, it was still within the range of his spiritual perception's detection. All it took was a mere thought for him to identify where Hu Xiao was and grab him. It was nothing at all. Yes. Hu Xiao nodded vehemently as he retrieved everything that he had taken away from them. Against an opponent who could grab him so easily, he knew that he did not stand a chance. After placing everything on the ground, Hu Xiao turned to Zhongxian and lowered his head subserviently. Elder, may I leave now? He no longer pulled his weight before the young man. I said take out everything that you have, didn't I? Where are your own possessions? Zhongxian asked. Since he was already doing this, he might as well take away everything that Hu Xiao had. He did not feel any pangs of guilt taking stuff away from a guy who went around robbing others anyway. Chapter 2250 Exact Vengeance for Me, Zhao YS. Not daring to argue with the young man, Hu Xiao quickly handed his storage ring over. Zhongxian wiped off the soul imprint on the storage ring to take a look at the contents within before nodding in satisfaction. As expected of a conferred god king, there were quite a number of good things in there. While they were not too useful to him, they should prove to be quite useful for his parents, Luo Chichi and Sun Qiong. You can scram now. Zhongxian waved his hand dismissively. Elder, thank you for sparing my life. After kowtowing thrice, Hu Xiao immediately ran away as quickly as he could. He understood that the flooding sea was a place that preached the survival of the fittest. He might have had all his possessions taken away, but he could still recoup his losses as long as he was still around. The antagonists usually lost their lives for spouting too much nonsense, so he would not make such a mistake. After Hu Xiao left, Zhongxian looked at Ao Feng and the other god kings and waved his hand. Take back whatever belongs to you. The crowd looked at one another, and after a moment of hesitation, they finally stepped forward to take back whatever belonged to them with reddened faces. Initially, they had been a little displeased at how the young man was able to watch nonchalantly as they were getting extorted, but such a thought had already been vanquished from their heads. They were only strangers, so why should the young man help them? They should be grateful that he was willing to return their possessions to them. Elder, thank you for your help. Ao Feng quickly reverted to his human form before bowing deeply to express his gratitude. There's no need to stand on ceremony, Zhongxian said with a wave of his hand. It wasn't my intention to absorb the condensed earth essence, but that doesn't change the fact that I have still done so. I hope that we can call it quits after I retrieved your possessions for you. Definitely. Ao Feng nodded vehemently in response. He fell silent with a conflicted look on his face for a moment before he asked, Elder, by any chance, is it possible that you are the conferred god king of the 9 skies? Given the huge commotion that had happened during the world conferment, there was no way he would be oblivious to it. It was just that, he did not think that he would meet the other party there. Furthermore, the other party was also much younger than he had expected. Yes, I am, Zhongxian admitted frankly. His are the conferred god king of the 9 skies. The next. Heaven subjugation monarch? No wonder he's so powerful. So, the red clouds that appeared 2 days ago was caused by that young man over there. Hearing the conversation between Ao Feng and Zhongxian, a huge uproar broke out amid the crowd. It was only at this moment that the god kings realized why the young man was so powerful despite only being a god king. That explains why you were able to absorb the condensed earth essence. Ao Feng struck his fist against his palm in realization. The spiritual energy contained within the condensed earth essence was so pure that even he, as a conferred god king, was unable to absorb it carelessly. Yet, the young man was able to use it for his cultivation. All this while, Ao Feng had been thinking that it was weird that something like this could happen, and just as he had thought, the young man was indeed no ordinary person. The conferred king of the 9 skies, a person who was destined to become a god monarch. It was no wonder he could absorb the condensed earth essence easily. At this moment, Ao Feng suddenly thought of something and said, "Elder, I know of a treasure here that will likely be useful to you." "Oh?" Zhong Xian asked. "Roughly 5,000 li away from here, I saw some monarch spirit grass in a dimension rift. I didn't dare enter the area with my current cultivation, but if it's you, Elder, I think that you should be able to do it easily," Ao Feng said. "Monarch spirit grass?" Zhong Xian's eyes lit up. "Are you referring to the legendary medicinal herb that is useful even for the cultivation of a god monarch?" He had read about the medicinal herb in one of the books that Kongsha had left behind. Most medicinal herbs were useless to him, so he needed something of that tier in order to raise his cultivation quickly. Ao Feng nodded. "Lead the way," Zhong Xian said. In terms of effectiveness, it went without saying that the monarch spirit grass was far better than that of the condensed earth essence. He might just be able to push for a breakthrough to conferred god king realm pinnacle or even god monarch. "What do we do with him?" Ao Feng pointed to the god king who had given away Zhong Xian earlier to Hu Xiao. "I don't think that there's any need to keep him alive anymore," Zhong Xian said as he flung his sleeves coldly. Please, spare my life." The god king was in the midst of begging for mercy when he suddenly felt himself losing control over his body. Then, his body began swelling up as the zhenqi in his body became erratic, and the next moment, he abruptly exploded. Just like that, his body and soul were utterly obliterated. If Zhong Xian had not been strong enough, that god king's betrayal would have cost him his life. In a place like the flooding sea, it was foolish to show mercy to one's enemies. Others would simply take one's compassion for granted. Ao Feng and the other god kings recoiled in shock from the sight. When they saw how the young man let Hu Xiao get away, they had thought that the young man was still too young and good-natured for his own good, but after witnessing such a sight. Indeed, it would be foolish to get on the wrong side of someone they could not afford to mess with. Ao Feng felt extremely grateful that he had stuck to his principles and had not betrayed the young man, or else that could very well have been his fate. "Let's go." Paying no heed to the rest of the god kings, Zhong Xian urged Ao Feng to lead the way. Hoo. With a livid face, Hu Xiao gnashed his teeth together as he muttered hatefully, "There's no one else. He must be that conferred god king of the 9 skies." It was not too hard to deduce the truth. Other than the conferred god king of the 9 skies, who else, other than the god monarchs, could possess such frightening strength? He might be formidable, but so what? Our conferred god king Zhao Ya, who was groomed by god monarch Fuming himself, is nowhere weaker than him. Hu Xiao thought of the silhouette of that valiant lady as he clenched his fists tightly. Over the past month, god monarch Fuming had paid a heavy price in order to groom conferred god king Zhao Ya, and fortunately, the latter had not let him down. Conferred god king Zhao Ya had displayed exceptional talent that far surpassed any conferred god king that he had seen before. Hu Xiao did not mind losing his own items. He could always recoup his losses easily by snatching the possessions of others. However, he could not forgive the young man for the humiliation he had suffered. And if he enlisted the help of conferred god king Zhao Ya, he might just able to return the favor to the young man. With such a thought in mind, he quickly took out a unique communication jade token that had been bestowed upon them by the god monarch. It was an artifact that could be used even in the flooding sea. After sending out his message, around 10 minutes later, the space around him wavered, and a person appeared before him. Dressed in silver armor was a valiant young lady, who, despite her great beauty, commanded a cold and domineering presence that no one dared look down upon. "Zhao Wai, what business do you have with me?" the young lady said with a cold voice that seemed to distance her from others. It was due to God Monarch Fuming's help that she had been able to attain the strength that she currently possessed. Before entering the flooding sea, God Monarch Fuming had told her to take care of the God Kings and conferred God Kings from the sky of adamant gold. It was for this reason that she unhesitatingly parted from her juniors to rush over upon receiving the message from Hu Xiao. Conferred God King Zhao Ya, I was robbed by another conferred God King just a moment ago, and the condensed earth essence that I went to great lengths to prepare for God Monarch Fuming has been taken away. I beseech you to help me apprehend that insolent fellow. Hu Xiao bowed respectfully as he spoke. Even though the other party was much younger than him, he did not dare act too haughtily in her presence, especially due to the vast disparity in their strength. Who was it? Zhao Ya asked coldly. She had never been one to beat about the bush, so she got straight to the point. I don't know what his name is, but he's very likely the person who received the world conferment a few days ago, the conferred God King of the Nine Skies, Hu Xiao replied. Even though everyone knew about the conferred God King of the Nine Skies, his identity remained a mystery to everyone except the God Monarchs. After all, this was a matter of grave import. The conferred God King of the Nine Skies. Zhao Ya repeated with a cold glint in her eyes. Prior to entering the flooding sea, the God Monarchs had instructed her to be careful if she encountered the conferred God King of the Nine Skies. Since then, she had been wanting to meet the other party, but who would have thought the fellow would actually make a move on one of the people on her side? He sure was brazen. It seemed like someone was asking for a lesson. Chapter 2251. Can I take back my words? Where is he? Zhao Ya asked with a wintry aura around her. He's currently at the mountain stream north of here. Hu Xiao pointed in the direction. Lead the way. Hu Xiao hesitated for a brief moment before saying, that person is quite strong. I fear that we might be in danger if we head there by ourselves. Don't worry and lead the way. I won't let him touch a single strand of your hair as long as I'm around, Zhao Ya replied coolly. Hearing those words of reassurance, Hu Xiao heaved a sigh of relief before excitedly leading the way. Soon, they arrived in the vicinity of where the condensed earth essence was located. However, only the God Kings who had been injured by the phantasmagoric spirits earlier were left in the area. When they saw Hu Xiao returning yet again, their faces immediately warped in fear as they cowered backward. Paying no heed to the looks on their faces, Zhao Ya asked, where did the conferred God King of the Nine Skies go? He has already left with conferred God King Ao Feng. We aren't too sure where they are. This was the response that the most senior God King of the group gave. It was not that they were intentionally concealing the truth to protect Zhongxian, but the conversation about the monarch spirit grass earlier had been held privately to avoid the information from leaking. As a result, the God Kings had no idea where they were heading. Hu Xiao frowned. He did not think that they would leave so quickly, and he said in frustration, it hasn't been long, so I reckon they shouldn't have gotten far yet. But before he could finish his words, Zhao Ya's body suddenly began trembling as she seemed to have noticed something. She immediately turned to the God Kings and anxiously asked, do you know what the name of the conferred God King of the Nine Skies is? I'm not too sure. However, I think he goes by the surname of Zhong. There's a lady in the group that is close to that addresses him as Zhong Shi, a God King replied. Facing two conferred God Kings who could dictate their fate, there was no one who would dare lie to their face out of fear of offending them. Zhong. There was a look of cognizance on Zhao Ya's face as she heaved a sigh of relief. She quickly calmed her agitated emotions before turning to face Hu Xiao once more. Tell me everything that happened between you and the conferred God King of the Nine Skies earlier. Not expecting Zhao Ya to suddenly ask him about the details of the incident instead of pursuing the young man, Hu Xiao scrunched his face awkwardly. He knew that he was at fault for this matter for attempting to steal from the group, so he had no idea how he should explain the situation. Seeing that Hu Xiao was reluctant to talk, Zhao Ya pointed to one of the God Kings and said, you, recount what happened earlier to me. Yes. Not daring to offend Zhao Ya, the God King immediately explained everything that had happened in detail. Is everything he has said the truth? Zhao Ya turned to look at Hu Xiao without the slightest expression on her face. This. It's all the truth. There are no rules here in the flooding sea, and it's survival of the fittest. I'm also doing all of this for our sky of adamant gold. Hu Xiao quickly explained, but before he could finish his words, a palm had already landed on his cheek. Peng! His body tumbled across the land before crashing heavily into a boulder, causing his head to spin. Conferred God King Zhao Yue, what do you mean by this? If you have any problems with me, we can always talk it out. Hu Xiao was on the verge of going crazy. Was this young lady sick in the head? Why would she hit him before he could finish his words? No matter how you look at it, we are from the same team, right? Even if I have done wrong by snatching from those weaker than me, you don't have to slap me like that, right? Peng peng peng. Paying no heed to Hu Xiao's protests, Zhao Yue sent fist after fist toward Hu Xiao's abdomen. Hu Xiao, of course, tried to retaliate, but he was completely powerless before Zhao Yue's overwhelming strength. In the blink of an eye, he had already sustained severe injuries, and blood was pouring out from all over. While coughing out blood, tears streamed down Hu Xiao's cheeks. Didn't you mention earlier that you wouldn't allow anyone to touch a single strand of my hair? Yet, the one who attacked me in the end is none other than you. The god kings around the area also looked at one another in confusion. They could not understand the sudden friendly fire from the young lady. They had thought that Hu Xiao had brought his backup over for vengeance, and their treasures would be taken away from them yet again. But before they knew it, his backup started pummeling him instead. Furthermore, her blows were decisive and vicious, showing that she had no plans of showing mercy at all. Can anyone tell me what's going on here? Who am I? What am I? Where am I? Everyone was flabbergasted by the turn of events. Feeling utterly indignant by the sudden pummeling, Hu Xiao bellowed, I am no match for you, so I have no choice but to accept what you do to me. However, the god monarch has instructed you to take care of everyone from the sky of adamant gold, so at the very least, shouldn't you give me a reason for your actions? This is too much. I called you here to exact vengeance for me, not to beat me up. I should have long thought of it when I heard about the conferred god king of the nine skies, Zhao Yue muttered to herself before she directed a cold gaze toward Hu Xiao. That person whom you want to take vengeance on, is my teacher. Other than her teacher, who else could possibly cause such a huge commotion in the world? She had been thinking that she could finally surpass her teacher and be of some use to him after spending so many years cultivating in the space-time mirror, but it seemed like she was still underestimating the capabilities of her teacher. In the end, her teacher was still as monstrously fast as before. In just one short month, he had already risen to become the conferred god king of the nine skies. Even Zhao Yue could not help but find this unbelievable. Your teacher? Hu Xiao's body shuddered as he spurted a mouthful of blood. Conferred god King Zhao Yue, what you mean is that, he has once guided you. The reason I was able to grow so fast was due to the strong foundation that my teacher built for me. Without my teacher, I wouldn't be who I am today, Zhao Yue replied. And there wouldn't be Wang Ying, Zheng Yang, Liu Yang, Yuan Dao, Lu Chong, Wei Ruyan, Zhong Zhouxiao, Kong Shiyao, Dan Xiaotian, or Bai Wanqing. Wait a moment. Aren't they the conferred god kings of the other god monarchs? What relationship do they have with the conferred god king of the nine skies? Hu Xiao was a little dazed. It was not that he could not understand what Zhao Yue was saying, but it was simply so unbelievable that he was having trouble wrapping his mind around such an idea. We are all his disciples. Zhao Yue replied. You are, all his disciples? But, you are all the strongest conferred god kings in the nine skies. If you are all his disciples, then... Hu Xiao exclaimed in a fluster. It was at this instant that he finally understood why the other party had given him a beating. It was fortunate that he had only told Zhao Yue that he had attempted to steal their teacher's possessions. If his other disciples learned of the matter as well, he would really be a goner. What the heck was this? Even though everyone had been saying that the conferred god king of the nine skies could very well become the next heaven subjugation monarch, Hu Xiao himself did not think that the possibility was too likely. After all, the nine god monarchs would not allow the rise of yet another heaven subjugation monarch to threaten their position. With the new batch of conferred god kings that the god monarchs had groomed, He believed that they would be able to stop the conferred God King of the Nine Skies with ease. But this effectively meant that the 12 strongest experts within the flooding sea at this very moment were the conferred God King of the Nine Skies and his 11 disciples. They were practically an untouchable existence there. The rest of you should have heard what we said. Tell me where the conferred God King of the Nine Skies has gone. Zhao Yue turned to the rest of the God Kings. A God King hesitated for a moment before pointing in a direction. They headed in that direction. Thanks. Zhao Yue grabbed the tail of tiger form Hu Xiao and swiftly flitted in the direction pointed out to her. Finally, she was going to meet her teacher once more. The more she thought about it, the more agitated she became. On the other hand, Hu Xiao, who was hanging in midair by his tail, suddenly realized that a worse fate was awaiting him. The earlier beating was just a teaser, and the true show would begin once they arrived before the conferred God King of the Nine Skies. Otherwise, why would Zhao Yue drag him along with her? If only I'd known this would happen. I would have obediently gone around searching for treasures. Not only did I fail to exact my vengeance, I'm even going to be beaten up real bad. To think that I was even relieved for a moment when I heard God Monarch Fuming instructing her to take care of us. Is it too late to retract my words? I don't really want her to take care of me anymore. Chapter 2252 Monarch Spirit Grass. Are you sure that the Monarch Spirit Grass is here? Zhong Xian frowned. The dimension rift before his eyes was more frightening than anything he had seen before. Under the frightening spatial turbulence everything that entered it was broken down into a 7-colored aurora. Even conferred God Kings would not be able to enter such an area easily. Given that the Monarch Spirit Grass was just another medicinal herb, was it really possible for it to survive in such conditions? I am certain of it. Ao Feng nodded. This is the 4th time that the flood of spiritual energy has occurred, and this is the 4th time I have come here. I have been exploring the area all this while, so I am still quite familiar with the terrain here. That is also why I was able to bring people straight to the condensed earth essence. Zhong Xian nodded. He had been wondering how Ao Feng was able to figure out the location of the condensed earth essence so quickly even though there were so many phantasmagoric spirits guarding the area. It turned out that he had been there a few times, just that he had not been strong enough to claim it the last few times. The dimension rift wasn't that terrifying the last few times I was here. Back then, I was still able to see through the shattered space to see what is within, but it seems like the space has further destabilized over time, Ao Feng remarked with a frown. Destabilized over time? Yes. The dimension rift wasn't this big or violent back then, and I was able to enter it the last few times I was here, but I couldn't obtain the Monarch Spirit Grass. I didn't think that it would become like this in the last decade, Ao Feng explained. Zhong Xian nodded as he examined the dimension rift contemplatively. He had not been there 10 years ago, so he could not tell what the situation was. However, with the current state of the dimension rift, it would not be too easy for him to enter it even with his current cultivation. He turned his gaze over to Luo Chichi and asked, "Is it possible for you to stabilize the space in there?" As a manifestation of the dimension silencer, Luo Chichi's ability to manipulate space far surpassed that of any conferred God King. If anyone could do it, it would probably be her. I think so, but I won't be able to sustain it for too long, Luo Chichi replied. How long? Probably around 20 breaths at the very most. That's enough, Zhong Xian replied with a smile. I'll try to get the Monarch Spirit Grass within 20 breaths. All right then, Luo Chichi replied. She walked up to the dimension rift, and her body morphed into a round orb. Wang! A light buzzing echoed from the orb, and the spatial turbulence within the dimension rift immediately calmed down. Even the 7-colored aurora froze in space, not moving in the least. This. Ao Feng blinked in bewilderment. All this while, he had thought that the young lady was an ordinary God King serving the conferred God King of the Nine Skies, but who could have known that she was a powerhouse herself? Despite being a conferred God King himself, Ao Feng himself was unable to achieve such a feat. In other words, if he battled the young lady, even with the disparity in their cultivation, he still would not be a match for her. As expected of the conferred God King of the Nine Skies, Even the people around him could not be underestimated. Who? As soon as Luo Chichi stabilized the space inside the dimension rift, Zhongxian leaped right into it. Flitting through the still seven-colored aurora, Zhongxian quickly observed his surroundings. Initially, he had thought that the dimension rift was just yet another hazard of nature that occurred on this piece of land, but after entering it, he realized that he was underestimating the nature of the dimension rift. If left alone, it would eventually swallow this land whole. It's that same energy from before. Zhongxian frowned as he ventured deeper in. He could sense terrifyingly powerful energy flowing in the depths of the dimension rift, hastening its growth, and this energy was identical to the grey currents he had seen in the depths of the mountain stream and in the abyss beneath Spirit Origin Royal City. Zhongxian quickly wrapped his pathos of heaven Zhenqi around his body before proceeding further. Soon, amid the cracks of darkness, he saw 3 stalks of monarch spirit grass floating in midair, seemingly on the verge of being devoured by the darkness. Fragments of broken space that flowed close to the monarch spirit grass would be devoured by it, and the leaves would grow even lusher. Legend has it that the monarch spirit grass thrives through absorbing the fragments of space, resulting in it harnessing powerful spatial powers. It seems like the rumors are true, Zhongxian thought grimly. Unlike other medicinal herbs, the monarch spirit grass did not grow on spiritual energy but fragments of space, making it quite a unique existence. I feel like someone intentionally planted the monarch spirit grass here in order to stabilize this dimension rift. This dimension rift was caused by the grey energy that could neutralize even the heaven's path Zhenqi, so it was inevitable that it would continue to expand exponentially as it devoured the energy in the surroundings. Based on what he had heard from Ao Feng, this dimension rift had existed for 40 years, but if that was really the case, it should have long swallowed the entire flooding sea. It should not have been as small as it appeared. It was the monarch spirit grass that had prevented that tragedy from happening. Its roots were tying the dimension rift together, limiting its expansion. On top of that, through absorbing the fragmented space, it was preventing the fragmented space from destabilizing the surrounding space. This had caused the expansion of the dimension rift to slow considerably. It seemed too much of a coincidence that the monarch spirit grass would appear where it was needed. But if he said that someone had intentionally planted it here, who could it be? God monarchs could not enter the flooding sea, and conferred god kings were unable to pull it off. Jeji. While Zhongxian was still in thought, he could feel the frozen space around him beginning to crack. It seemed like Luo Chichi was reaching her limits. I can't waste any more time here. Luo Chichi could only last 20 breaths in total, and half of the time had already passed. He needed to make his decision quick. His main goal there was to take the 3 stalks of monarch spirit grass away, but if he did that, he would risk destabilizing this dimension rift, which had barely been kept under control. There could be adverse consequences if he did so. It might devour the whole flooding sea whole, and it might even result in the dimension fissure above the flooding sea expanding further, hastening the doom of the firmament. But if he left it there, he could tell that the monarch spirit grass could no longer hinder the dimension rift anymore. This was also why Ao Feng was surprised by how much it had grown over the past decade. Most likely, it would only continue working for 1 or 2 months more before all hell broke loose. This might very well be the last flood of spiritual energy. When he heard that the flood of spiritual energy occurred once every decade, he had assumed that it would continue that way and provide the firmament with resources every now and then. But he was clearly underestimating the severity of the problem. The flood of spiritual energy was an aberrant event, and this was proven by the instability of the flooding sea. It was only a matter of time before this temporary stopgap measure fell apart. By then, not only would the flood of spiritual energy come to a halt, the collapse of the flooding sea might even hasten the destruction. That would explain Ruo Xin and Kong Shi's anxiety in completing the War of the Heavens. It was only after coming into contact with all of this himself that he realized just how urgent the situation was. His previous thoughts had really been too shallow. The heavens were far more complex than he had thought. The crisis would not disappear just because he kept delaying the inevitable. Eventually, when the firmament fell to ruin, he would be affected as well. In other words, regardless of whether he decided to join the War of the Heavens or not, he was destined not to be able to live a peaceful life. If all the fragments of the heavens were put together, at the very least, there would still be a sliver of hope for everyone. Chapter 2253 Someone is faster than us, well, it'll be fine as long as you can last for another month or two, Zhongxian muttered. Without picking the monarch spirit grass, he turned around, returned to where the dimension silencer was floating, and said, "Let's go. I can still hold on." "Quick, go pick the monarch spirit grass first," Luo Chichi said anxiously. Their goal there was to claim the monarch spirit grass for themselves, so why was Zhongxian not picking it? "There's no need for that," Zhongxian replied as he grabbed the orb floating in the air and pulled her out of the dimension rift. Then, the space behind shattered, and a 7-colored aurora burst forth. Why? Luo Chichi did not understand the reason behind Zhongxian's actions. "There are plenty of things I can use to advance my cultivation, but there's only one firmament," Zhongxian said. It would have been good if he could obtain the monarch spirit grass, but it was not a necessity for him. There were other medicinal herbs he could rely on for a breakthrough to God Monarch. There was no need for him to sacrifice the flooding sea and the firmament for that. As someone who had only arrived in the firmament a month ago, he did not have any deep feelings for the firmament. He also was not as noble as Kongshe, who harbored great compassion for the entire world. However, at least as a human being, he could not bear to watch as an entire world was torn apart, and countless people lost their lives. He was starting to understand how Kongshe and Luo Ruoxin felt. Carrying heavy responsibilities on their shoulders, their hands were tied. They did not have the freedom to do as they pleased. But where else can we find a medicinal herb like the monarch spirit grass? Luo Chichi asked worriedly. "You have to advance your cultivation as quickly as possible." She was not a person of many words, but she was extremely perceptive of her surroundings. Despite not knowing about the War of the Heavens, she could tell that the young man was in a rush. He had always been keen to raise his cultivation, but he seemed to be more anxious than ever to do so. This made her realize that he was facing some compelling circumstances. But as the young man never spoke about it, she had chosen not to ask. She decided to simply do whatever she could to help him in his time of need. "It's fine. We'll eventually find a way out," Zhongxian replied with a smile as he took out a pinnacle god essence pill from Hu Xiao's storage ring and infused it with his pathos of heaven Zhenqi before passing it over to Luo Chichi. The young lady had exerted herself beyond her limits in order to stabilize the dimension rift earlier, causing her to sustain some internal damage. "I still know of a few places where there are medicinal herbs that could help a god monarch advance their cultivation. I can lead you there," Ao Feng offered. Zhongxian nodded in agreement. As someone who had participated in the previous 3 floods of spiritual energy, even though the treasures he had acquired thus far paled far in comparison to what Kongshe's direct disciples had collected, he would still have been able to uncover quite a bit of treasure. It would indeed be much more convenient for them with Ao Feng leading the way. It did not take long before they arrived before another area where an invaluable treasure was located. The midnight flower. It's a flower that only blossoms on the midnight of a full moon. It has to absorb the essence of the moon for thousands of years before it finally reaches maturity. Even though the conditions in the flooding sea are a little peculiar, the midnight flower only blossoms once every decade in here. The last time I was here, I saw one in the depths of the valley over there, Ao Feng said as he pointed in a certain direction. Glancing over, Zhongxian saw a lush mountain valley filled with innumerable god-king realm phantasmagoric spirits. "I'll head in to take a look." Zhongxian activated the disguise amulet before flitting into the valley. A moment later, however, he returned with a frown. Someone has already taken it. He could tell that there was indeed a midnight flower growing in there, but someone had beaten him to it. Did someone manage to gather a group to procure the midnight flower? Ao Feng was a little taken aback. The midnight flower, just like the condensed earth essence, was protected by the phantasmagoric spirits, making it nigh impossible for a person to collect the midnight flower by themselves. Even in a group, the chances of success were not too high. So, it was a little hard to believe that someone would actually be able to claim it. Did a group of conferred god kings work together for it or something? After all, Not everyone possessed unfathomable strength like the young man before him. It doesn't seem so. Based on the trail, it's an individual who snuck into the area and discreetly took the midnight flower away with him. It looks like the phantasmagoric spirits haven't even realized that it's missing, Zhongxian replied. He would have noticed if there were any marks of battle in the vicinity, but there was no such thing. Clearly, the person had, like him, discreetly snuck to where the midnight flower was and harvested it before leaving without kicking up a fuss. The reason Zhongxian was able to do it was because he had the disguise amulet with him. How did the other party manage it? Let's proceed to the next location then. I know a place that has desolate iron. This material can be used to forge god monarch tier artifacts. It's buried in the underground lava not too far from here. Since the midnight flower had been taken, there was no reason for them to remain there. Let's head over. Zhongxian nodded. While he already had a weapon in hand, he could still take the desolate iron and trade it for cultivation resources with the other god monarchs. Swiftly flitting ahead, the trio took roughly 10 breaths to get to the lava pool. Zhongxian wrapped his body in a layer of zhenqi to protect himself before diving into the lava. Not too long later, he returned with a frustrated look on his face. The desolate iron you spoke about has been taken away as well. That's impossible. Ao Feng shook his head in disbelief. The temperature in the lava before them was so great that even God King realm artifacts would melt in an instant in it. Even someone of Ao Feng's strength would not dare enter it recklessly. Just who in the world could enter the lava and take the desolate iron discreetly? What other treasures do you know of? Knowing their time was limited, Zhongxian quickly pressed on. I know there's a location that has otherworldly meteorite. Back then, the Heaven Subjugation Monarch and his 3 conferred god kings tried to claim it, but they weren't able to take it away with them. The last time I was there, it was still around, Ao Feng said. He was starting to lose confidence in himself after those 2 failures. Take me there, Zhongxian instructed. The 3 of them continued rushing forward, and this time, their destination was an ice mountain. It emanated a chilling frost that would freeze even a god king's zhenqi. I don't think that anyone will have come here, Luo Chichi said. The frost in the area was to the extent that it was hard for even her to enter the area, let alone the other conferred god kings. You should wait here for the time being. I'll head in to look, Zhongxian said. Driving the pathos of heaven, he swiftly acclimatized himself to the coldness before heading in. Around 10 minutes later, he returned with a bitter smile on his face. We came too late again. The ice mountain had only gotten colder the deeper one ventured, such that it was difficult for Zhongxian to endure the chill. Yet, he was unable to find the otherworldly meteorite that Ao Feng had mentioned. Based on the marks in the vicinity, it seemed like someone else had beaten them to it. They had gone to 3 places thus far, but the items had already been taken by someone else. It had only been a few hours since the flood of spiritual energy started, but it felt like the entire area had already been swept clean. Just who in the world was so capable as to obtain everything so quickly? Perplexed, Zhongxian turned to Ao Feng and asked, do you know if there has been a particularly formidable conferred god king who has appeared in the firmament in the past decade? Chapter 2254 Epitome Monarch Pill. Be it the midnight flower, desolate iron, or otherworldly meteorite, the environment that they lived in was not one where most conferred god kings would have been able to enter easily. Otherwise, Ao Feng would have already claimed them for himself. Despite that, there was still someone who had consistently beaten them to it. Just how formidable was their rival? Ao Feng pondered for a moment before replying. Due to the rise of the Heaven Subjugation Monarch, all of the god monarchs have begun paying close attention to the flood of spiritual energy. For it, they devoted a great deal of resources in order to nurture a group of talented cultivators. Based on what I have heard, our Sky of Cloud Dragon has groomed 3 of such cultivators. Through using the space-time mirror to warp temporal laws, all 3 of them have managed to receive their conferment from the Cloud Dragon Monarch before the flood of spiritual energy. I haven't met them yet, but it seems like their strength far surpasses that of other conferred god kings. Oh! Zhongxian frowned. Could it be that the 9 god monarchs knew that this would likely be the last flood of spiritual energy, so they were going all out to ensure their survival? With a perplexed look on his face, he asked, "Do you know the names of the 3 conferred god kings?" "Their names are Kong Shi Yarrow, Liu Yang, and I think there is one more called Zhong Jiuxiao," Ao Feng replied. "It's them." Zhong Xian was slightly surprised. He had been very worried about his disciples ever since they were taken away by the god monarchs. He was a little relieved after hearing that Wang Ying and Wei Ruyan were doing fine in the sky of Linglong, but based on what he was hearing, it seemed like most of them had successfully become conferred god kings. That was really a load off his chest. But speaking of which, was their cultivation not advancing a little too fast? It was fortunate that he had reached the same level, or else how embarrassing would it be if he was no match for them when they finally met each other again? Indeed. It isn't just the sky of Cloud Dragon that has done so. I heard that a powerful expert going by the name of Zhao Ya from the sky of Adamant Gold was conferred not too long ago, and her unique constitution allows her to easily cripple any opponent. Over in the sky of Blazing Sun, there is a spear expert known as Zheng Yang whose sharp and swift pierces can easily overcome any enemy. Demon monarch Chen Kuan seems to have taken in a disciple named Lu Chong not too long ago, and he boasts supreme soul arts that are second only to the god monarchs. The sky of Linglong has taken in 2 cultivators known as Wei Ruyan and Wang Ying, and one of them is a fearsome user of poison whereas the other is known to be able to breathe life into inanimate beings. As for the sky of Akron, the Akron god monarch has personally guided 3 cultivators named Yuan Dao, Dan Xiaotian, and Bai Ruanqing, and they have managed to become conferred god kings as well. Even though all of them have only risen to prominence recently, their strength is not to be underestimated. In terms of fighting prowess, they are more than a match for veteran conferred god kings like me. Ao Feng was completely oblivious to the peculiar expression on Zhong Xian's face as he swiftly went through the situation in the firmament. Then, with a grim look on his face, he said, "Do you think that they are the ones who have taken the treasure?" This. Zhong Xian sighed deeply. From the looks of things, that was likely the case. He did not have a good gauge of how powerful the other conferred god kings were, but if it was his direct disciples, given the simplified Heaven's Path divine art that they cultivated and the strong foundation they had built up over the years, there was no doubt that their fighting prowess would be top-notch. They might even be able to defeat Kong Shi's direct disciples. It was not that Zhong Xian's ability as a teacher was above Kong Shi's, but the fragments of heavens that they possessed were simply different from one another. Heaven's Order was an ability that allowed one to manipulate the building blocks of the world and bring one more time to cultivate. On the other hand, Heaven's Imperfections was an ability that allowed one to see through flaws and correct them. Without a doubt, the latter was far more powerful when it came to building up a cultivator's foundation. The 11 of them are incredibly powerful. If it's just 1 or 2 of them, you might still be able to subdue them. However, if they team up with one another, I'm afraid that even you will face trouble taking those treasures away from them. Elder, even though you are the conferred god king of the 9 skies, I advise you not to go head-on against them, Ao Feng said worriedly. He had witnessed the strength of the young man when he beat Hu Xiao easily earlier, but those 11 were no pushovers. With the artifacts that the god monarchs had bestowed to them, if they put their strength together, they would form a terrifying force indeed. That was also why the direct disciples of the Heaven Subjugation Monarch had been unrivaled in the flooding sea all this while. Not only were they strong individually, more importantly, their teamwork and coordination were also superb. Unless a god monarch intervened, there was no one in the world who could subdue them. Go head-on against them? Hearing those words, Zhong Xian chuckled softly beneath his breath before replying, "Rest assured, that won't happen." With a wave of his hand, he looked at Ao Feng and asked, "Other than those 3, are there any formidable treasures in the flooding sea that you know of?" Whether those treasures had been taken by his disciples or someone else, he had no intention of snatching them. Given so, it was meaningless to think too deeply into this matter. The flooding sea was extremely large, such that it would take quite a bit of time if they had to go around searching the area. It would be much more efficient to follow the wisdom of those who had been there before. In his view, even though Ao Feng's cultivation was SOSO, the knowledge he had accrued in the flooding sea was invaluable. Ao Feng contemplated for a moment before speaking carefully. There's one last treasure I can think of. It is the most incredible treasure I have seen in my entire life. If a god monarch obtains it, they will be able to advance their cultivation to a higher level. However, no one has been able to obtain it yet, so it has remained there for decades. A treasure that could allow a god monarch to advance their cultivation to a higher level. What is it? Zhong Xian asked. If such a treasure really existed, it was something that would make countless experts go frenzied over it. A glint flashed across Ao Feng's eyes as he replied, "It's the epitome monarch pill." Epitome monarch pill? Zhong Xian frowned. He had not seen this name in any book records he had read before, but it clearly was not a medicinal herb. It's a god monarch realm pill, Ao Feng replied. Pill? Why would there be a pill here? Zhong Xian frowned in incomprehension. The flooding sea was a chaotic place where no one lived. Why would there be a pill there, let alone a god monarch realm pill? Rumor has it that before the heaven subjugation monarch became a god monarch, he entered the flooding sea, and with his transcendental pill forging skills, he forged the epitome monarch pill. Back then, he managed to forge 2 of them. He ate one of them and successfully became a god monarch. However, as a result of his breakthrough, a cultivation ordeal was summoned, and the already unstable flooding sea became even more so. In the midst of the chaos, the second pill got away. After that incident, the heaven subjugation monarch instructed his direct disciples to find the second pill, but none of them have been able to do it to date. As a result, it has remained here over the years. While it doesn't possess the strength of a real god monarch, there is no doubt that it has already far surpassed the level of conferred god kings, Ao Feng explained. It was forged by the heaven subjugation monarch? Zhong Xian widened his eyes in realization. If there was someone in the world who could forge a god monarch realm pill despite not being a god monarch, it could only be the talented Kong Shi. Since the epitome monarch pill can help one become a god monarch, if I can get my hands on it, won't I be able to successfully make a breakthrough? Zhong Xian thought as he clenched his fists tightly together. Chapter 2255 Taming the Comets. Where is the epitome monarch pill then? Zhong Xian asked. To be frank, I'm not too sure where it is. I have only seen it once throughout the past floods of spiritual energy, and I nearly lost my life to it back then, Ao Feng said. You don't know? The pill possesses sentience, and it is able to transmogrify into a human. It's exceptionally skilled in concealing itself and assaulting those coming after it, making it a difficult opponent to deal with. In the previous flood of spiritual energy, it killed conferred god King Ao Yi of our Sky of Cloud Dragon. Ao Feng shook his head. Even in this land filled with all sorts of danger, what Ao Feng feared the most was still the epitome monarch pill. Morphed into a pill, it could hide in the narrowest of spaces, not emanating the slightest aura at all. It was like the perfect assassin that could silently snipe away the lives of the cultivators in the flooding sea one after another. Just recalling what happened back then made shivers run down his spine. If not for the disciples of the heaven subjugation monarch passing by just at that moment, he would have already been a goner. Where did you meet it last time? Zhong Xian asked. I met it at the Lake of Comets. The Lake of Comets was yet another dangerous land in the flooding sea. There were all sorts of rocks flying randomly in all directions, intersecting one another, forming something reminiscent of a massive formation. If not to seek treasures in there, even the strongest of conferred god king would do well to stay away from it. Let's head over there, Zhong Xian said. After receiving the coordinates from Ao Feng, he quickly tore open a spatial passageway. The first thing that came into their sight after walking out of the spatial passageway was a massive lake that rose all the way into the sky. There were countless comets flying in the area, emanating a brilliant glow. From time to time, these comets would collide into one another with a resounding explosion, and with a series of shockwaves, the surrounding space would collapse into a black dimension rift. What's truly frightening in the Lake of Comets is not the comets themselves nor their collision. It is the ever-changing gravity within that space, Ao Feng explained grimly. Those comets are unbelievably heavy despite their relatively smaller size, and due to their random movements, the gravitational field within the area changes chaotically. Zhong Xian frowned. He had experienced an abrupt change in the gravitational field back at the Azure Bridge. Back then, it had just been a swift 90-degree change in his center of gravity, but it had still left him disorientated for a brief moment. In the lake of comets, however, there were all sorts of comets flying in all directions, like a series of ping-pong balls flying all around an enclosed space. If the gravitational field within the area was constantly changing along with the movements of the comets, it would take him a long time to adapt to this new environment. By then, the flood of spiritual energy might have already ended. "I'll have a go." Taking in a deep breath, Zhongxian extended his spiritual perception to perceive the gravitational field within the area, but barely a moment later, his face started to turn ghastly pale. He felt as if he had been thrown into a washing machine and tossed around the place like a rag. Just as he had imagined, the gravity affected not only one's physical body but one's soul as well. One would have to swiftly adapt to the constant changes in order to be able to maneuver around the area properly. Luo Chichi took out a sword and tossed it in. The next moment, it began flying randomly in all directions, as if a fly buzzing randomly around the area. Peng! After moving randomly for a moment, under the relentless pull of gravity from all directions, the sword spirit finally dissipated, and the sword itself disintegrated. The three of them looked at one another with widened eyes. The sheer pressure from the gravitational force was actually enough to destroy a high-tier celestial god artifact so easily. Just the thought of it sent shivers down their spine. "How did you enter the area back then?" Luo Chichi asked. "Actually, I never entered the area. I was attacked while I was outside," Ao Feng replied with a reddened face. That explained it. Just looking at this area was enough to leave him with goosebumps all over. It was unimaginable that someone of Ao Feng's prowess would be able to enter and leave such a place safely. "I'll head in to take a swift look." "Wait outside and don't move recklessly," Zhongxian said. He channeled his sword intent around his body before walking right into the lake. Tzz. As soon as he entered the area, he felt a powerful pull tugging at his body, trying him to drag him somewhere. To resist the pull of gravity, Zhongxian exerted the strength of his physical body, causing his muscles to bulge out. The gravitational field around him continued changing, but by stiffening his body, he was able to remain rooted to the spot. He waited for a moment to allow himself to become accustomed to the change in gravity before taking a step forward. Su. Two comets were drawn to each other by each other's gravitational pull, and they surged rapidly toward him. Zhongxian quickly drew his sword and slashed at the two comets. The two comets broke apart simultaneously, and a stream of smoke flowed out from them. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. These comets are incredibly tough, are good stuff. Given that a high-tier celestial god sword had been destroyed so easily by the gravitational pull, he had been wondering how these comets were still able to remain intact in such an environment. As it turned out, the resilience of these comets had already reached a level comparable to God-King realm artifacts. What a pity that they can't be forged into weapons. However, if I could just collect these comets, it would be a sight to behold once I toss them toward my enemies. Through his eye of insight, he could tell that these comets could not be forged into weapons. Nevertheless, they would still make pretty decent weapons even if he tossed them as they were at his enemies. The only problem was that these comets were moving way too fast for him to collect. If I store them into my storage ring while they are moving, it will surely puncture a hole in my storage ring and shatter the space within. Due to the pull of gravity, the comets were both fast and forceful. As such, he could not simply collect them into his storage ring in their current state. He would have to first find a way to slow them down, but it was beyond his means to do so at the moment. Under the chaotic pull of gravity, even remaining on the spot was difficult enough for him. It would be nigh impossible for him to stop a comet in his current state. Even though these comets can't be forged into weapons, if I think of them as my bricks, I guess they could kind of be considered as weapons already. If so, is it possible for me to enchant them? His bricks were also good for pretty much nothing except for their exceptional resilience, which was similar to the comets. If his bricks could be enchanted, there was no reason these comets could not be enchanted. Once he enchanted them, he should be able to make them slowly come to a halt before placing them in his storage ring. I should give it a try. So, Zhongxian gave himself in to the gravitational pull and began flying toward one of the comets. As soon as he arrived close to one, he reached out to touch the comet. Outside the lake of comets. There are so many comets in there, and the gravitational field is a huge mess. Will Elder Zhong be fine? Ao Feng asked worriedly. I'm not sure. The forces inside the lake of comets are so chaotic that even I would have trouble freezing the space in there. I'm a little worried about Zhongshe as well, Luo Chichi replied fretfully. Dodging those fast-moving comets was already difficult in itself, and the constantly changing gravitational field only made things worse. One would have to be incredibly lucky to survive there. In terms of danger, it was several times worse than facing the phantasmagoric spirits. The fact that even Luo Chichi, a master of manipulating space, was unable to move freely in such a region showed just how dangerous the Lake of Comets was. It's too dangerous. I wouldn't even last 10 seconds in there. Should we call Elder Zhong to pull back? Ao Feng asked. But before he could finish his words, his face suddenly froze. He had just witnessed the impossible. Deep in the Lake of Comets, a young man was standing calmly on the spot, and several comets were circling neatly around him in single file. From time to time, these comets would leap up a little, as if trying to act cute. They looked no different from a bunch of well-trained performance dogs. Chapter 2256 The epitome monic pill appears. Ao Feng suddenly felt his mind blanking out entirely, reaching a state of absolute emptiness. So, this was what that would happen when the string of rationality in one's head finally snapped. Those comets flying around the area were supposed to harness boundless might, were they not? Why would such a situation happen? It looks like those comets have been enchanted and tamed. Luo Chichi also gulped in shock. Enchanted? But he only entered the Lake of Comets a short moment ago. I don't get it. How is this even possible? Ao Feng's cheeks were twitching wildly, a reflection of the state of his brain. God Kings possessed the ability to bestow spirit to objects, and he was able to do the same. However, he would need to spend a great deal of time and effort, possibly several months while draining him both mentally and physically, in order to do so. Yet, the young man was able to enchant so many comets within 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Not to mention, he had even managed to tame all of them. What was even more shocking was how lively the young man was despite all of that. It was as if what he had just done was no big deal and did not take a toll on him at all. While the two of them were still in shock, the young man in the Lake of Comets leaped forward toward his next comet, and upon touching it, the trail of comets following him would increase by one. Just like that, the line of comets grew longer and longer. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the comets in the lake were following Zhongxian. What is Elder Zhong doing by taming those comets? Ao Feng muttered weakly. Brew, aren't you here to find the epitome monic pill? What are you toying with those comets for then? I guess, he's trying to get the epitome monic pill to appear, Luo Chichi deduced. Ah! Ao Feng exclaimed. The epitome monic pill is able to morph into a pill and hide from the eyes of even the strongest experts. If it's hiding among the comets, biding its time to launch a sneak attack, it would be difficult for even someone as powerful as Elder Zhong to guard against it. So, by taming all the comets, he will be able to seal off the hiding spots of the epitome monic pill. It is a good plan. Why didn't I think of it beforehand? Once the surroundings had been cleaned up, there would be no place for the epitome monic pill to hide anymore. That would make it much easier for them to deal with it. He's the kind of person who is always able to find unique ways out of difficult predicaments, Luo Chichi said with a smile. Who dares ruin my home? You are asking to be killed. While those two were speaking, loud rumbling echoed in the air, and the entire Lake of Comets suddenly began shaking. Following that, a massive face suddenly appeared in midair. A god monarch. Luo Chichi narrowed her eyes in shock. She had seen Fairy Linglong using this ability before. It was an ability unique to the god monarchs. That's the epitome monarch pill. How could this be? Even though the flooding sea is rich in resources, it shouldn't have been that easy. It actually managed to make a breakthrough in its cultivation. Does that mean that it's a real god monarch now? Ao Feng mumbled in disbelief. Luo Chichi shook her head in incredulity as she asked, "But don't god monarchs have to govern a certain region or receive the anima of yearning from countless people in order to successfully ascend? How can a pill manage to do it?" In order to become a full-fledged god monarch, one had to be recognized by countless people to receive a boundless amount of anima of yearning to pull off the breakthrough. For example, in order to become a real god monarch, Kongsha had challenged the 9 god monarchs one after another to receive the recognition from the people in the firmament. How could a mere pill that had not gone through anything at all possibly become a god monarch? Ao Feng pondered for a moment before replying. It could be because we are in the flooding sea and not the firmament. Flooding sea and not the firmament. Luo Chichi pondered over those words for a moment before nodding in realization. The flooding sea used to be from the firmament, but it had torn away from it. As such, a different set of laws might apply there as opposed to the firmament. Furthermore, the heaven subjugation monarch made a breakthrough here before returning to the firmament to challenge the 9 god monarchs and receive the recognition of the firmament, Ao Feng said. It's just that I find it a little weird. The gap between a conferred god king and a god monarch is humongous, such that in the entire history of the firmament, the only one who's managed to bridge the gap was the heaven subjugation monarch. The epitome monarch pill is ultimately just a pill, so how did it manage to do it? Such thoughts were shared by the young man standing in the middle of the Lake of Comets. Even Zhongxian was unable to summon a massive face in the sky with his current prowess. One would have to possess a deep understanding of spatial laws to pull that off. Could the epitome monarch pill have succeeded in making a breakthrough? A feat that countless cultivators had attempted and failed at was actually achieved by a mere pill. No, that's not right. It's the special environment of the Lake of Comets that allowed it to do so. Zhongxian spread his spiritual perception around the area, and soon, he realized the secret behind the massive face. It was not that the epitome monarch pill had managed to become a god monarch. Rather, it had lived in the Lake of Comets for so long that it had gained full control over the area. If the Lake of Comets was a dominion, the epitome monarch pill would be its master. It could manipulate the spiritual energy within this space freely to form whatever it wanted to. You wish to kill me. The least you can do is reveal your main body. This mere will of yours doesn't seem to have the strength to do so, Zhongxian said before flicking his finger lightly. Catcher. The massive face in the sky shattered into pieces. You. It did not take long for yet another massive face to appear in the sky. It glared at Zhongxian furiously, but the young man simply shattered it easily with another flick of his finger before returning to taming the comets. His main goal there was to find the epitome monarch pill and make a breakthrough to the god monarch realm with it. He did not intend to pull any punches in dealing with it. Besides, based on what he had heard from Ao Feng, it appeared that the epitome monarch pill had killed quite a few god kings and conferred god kings over the past few decades. Boom. After the massive face had been shattered twice by Zhongxian, the space in the Lake of Comets began to distort, and a young man finally materialized. He shared the same appearance as the massive face, hairless and ferocious. You darned brat. I gave you a chance, didn't I? You're the one who pushed your luck. Huala. Zhongxian immediately felt as if his body was bound by some force. The young man was manipulating the gravitational field in order to seal his movements. At the same time, the young man dashed forward and launched palm thrust to crush Zhongxian. You aren't a true god monarch yet. Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. While his fighting prowess far exceeded that of other conferred god kings, he could not yet deal with a real god monarch. Although the epitome monarch pill had managed to become the master of the Lake of Comets, it was still some way off from becoming a god monarch. As such, it was unable to fully tap into the energies of the firmament or the flooding sea, thus limiting its strength. In other words, the epitome monarch pill was not a threat to Zhongxian. Go. Zhongxian beckoned with a wave of his hand. The comets that were following behind him immediately charged forth like a long, soaring dragon to crash right into the young man. The sudden charge of so many enchanted comets created a massive compression in the space of the Lake of Comets, causing countless dimension rifts to appear in the area. The young man's palm strike was nothing compared to the force coming from the charge of the comets, causing him to be overpowered right away. You! Just as Ao Feng thought, the epitome monarch pill was initially hiding among the comets, and it was intending to secretly sneak up on Zhongxian to launch a surprise assault. But never in its wildest imagination could it have fathomed that someone would be able to tame all the comets so quickly and even use them against it. It felt so infuriated that it could just blow up on the spot. At the same time, it could not help but wonder in bewilderment. Are all conferred god kings this frightening nowadays? Chapter 2257. Legendary treasure surfaces. In a moment of fury, the young man raised his hands, and a spatial ripple swept into the surroundings. The comets that Zhongxian had not managed to tame yet suddenly changed direction and bolted right toward where Zhongxian was. The abrupt increase in pressure from the incoming comets made Zhongxian feel as if his blood had frozen in place. Even with his current physical body and soul cultivation, it would be impossible for him to withstand all those incoming comets. He could use the comets that he had tamed to defend against them, but it would undo all his hard work. Let's see if the comets you control can withstand my sword. Taking a deep breath, Zhongxian drew the Crimson Heaven sword. He had not used this sword ever since his physical body, soul cultivation, and Zhenqi cultivation had reached the conferred God King realm. It was time for him to test out the limits of his fighting prowess once more. He began channeling his Zhenqi and sword intent into the Crimson Heaven sword, and the sword released an excited cry reminiscent of the roar of a dragon upon receiving all this nourishment. Hearing the sound from the Crimson Heaven sword, Ao Feng felt his knees turning to jelly as cold sweat dripped from his head. That's the 8 notes of Heavenly Dragon. Meanwhile, the roar made Zhongxian feel as if all the cells in his body had been revitalized, filling him with boundless energy. Go! With a deep bellow, Zhongxian executed the pathos of Heaven 4 Dan sword art, releasing a surge of sword chi reminiscent of a stream of white light. It was a strike filled with indignation and yearning, but there was an unyielding spirit behind it all. In an instant, the comets that were streaming toward Zhongxian were sliced in half, like cloth ripped apart. The halved comets ended up passing Zhongxian on each side. However, the sword chi did not just stop there. It continued to surge ahead to strike the epitome monarch pill. The young man's face paled in the face of such a powerful sword art. He scrambled to the side to dodge the sword chi, but as if the sword chi had some sort of homing function, no matter how he tried to run around, he was unable to dodge it. The wind batters unceasingly on the unwilling tree, a son seeks to be filial, but time slips through his fingers. The conceptualization of the sword art carried a hint of helplessness. It was a feeling of standing against a force that could not be averted no matter how one tried to avoid it. It was a force of karma, and so, it could not be dodged. Damn it! The young man cursed as he raised his arms and faced the sword chi head-on. Boom! The lake of comets wavered, and a massive dimension rift was torn open. The young man was knocked back several steps before he was able to regain his balance, and he gasped desperately for breath. He lost his arms. Ao Feng bit his tongue in shock. The epitome monarch pill's arms had been severed by that one strike. He was the strongest existence in the flooding sea. How could he have ended up being overpowered? Was the conferred god kings of the 9 skies not a little too frightening? Luo Chichi heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing that. Humph. The epitome monarch pill harumphed. His relaxed gaze turned grim as he realized that his opponent was stronger than expected. He directed the energy within his body toward his shoulders, and soon, a pair of new arms grew out. In the first place, his human form was a transmogrification, and his arms and legs were nothing more than a manifestation of his medicinal energy. Even though he had lost quite a bit of energy from the severing of his arms, it was not an irrecoverable wound to him. As long as I have medicinal energy left within me, even if you sever all 4 of my limbs and my head, I still can recover without a hitch, the young man sneered coldly. Let me tell you, I have enough medicinal energy in me to do this more than a dozen times. I only hope that you have enough energy to execute that sword art of yours that many times, or else you will certainly be ripped to pieces. But before the epitome monarch pill could finish his words, Zhongxian suddenly raised his hand, and the 2 severed limbs flew over to him. With a light tap, those 2 arms immediately morphed into a sesame-sized pill, and he swallowed it without any hesitation. The epitome monarch pill widened his eyes in disbelief. We are in the midst of a life-and-death battle, yet you are actually eating my hands right before my eyes. You are going overboard. They might just have been arms, but that was still medicinal energy coming from a god monarch realm pill. The medicinal energy was concentrated enough for god monarchs to spend days trying to assimilate it, but the other party had swallowed it in the middle of a battle. Was he not afraid of being stuffed to death? With a livid face, the epitome monarch pill raised his palm once more to strike Zhongxian. Yet another burst of sword chi shot forth, and the arms of the epitome monarch pill fell off once again. Just like before, no matter how he tried to dodge it, the sword chi still struck its target. The epitome monarch pill channeled his energy to his shoulders once more to regrow his arms, but as soon as he raised his head after he was done, he saw the other party turning the severed arms into a pill and swallowing it again. The epitome monarch pill was really starting to lose his cool. Are you a perverted psycho or something? Are you going to continue severing my limbs and eating me till there is nothing left of me? I am a god monarch realm pill. To make matters worse, the epitome monarch pill realized that the Zhenqi cultivation of his opponent, after devouring 4 limbs, had risen from conferred god-king realm primary stage to intermediate stage. If this went on, his opponent would only grow stronger and stronger. This is supposed to be a proper battle, but all that's on your mind seems to be how you can slowly savor me in your mouth. You be ****. If I don't kill you today, my surname won't be Pill anymore. With a ferocious bellow, the epitome monarch pill gathered all his strength in his palm to strike down on Zhongxian. But just as the blow was about to land, he narrowed his eyes and cursed, "The freak." This time, his arms and legs were severed by the other party's sword chi. And just like before, the other party delightfully gathered his severed limbs and compressed them into a pill before swallowing it. Boom. His cultivation rose to conferred God-King realm advanced stage. The epitome monarch pill felt goosebumps rising all over his body. Years of being in the flooding sea had nourished him greatly, allowing him to store huge reserves of medicinal energy. However, losing his 4 limbs was still a huge blow. With veins popping on his forehead, the epitome monarch pill once again grew his limbs once more. This time, however, the aura that he emanated was far weaker than before. Run! Knowing that he was not a match for Zhongxian, the epitome monarch pill immediately morphed back into his pill form before jolting a crack in the space. Then, he swiftly slipped into it. Not expecting the epitome monarch pill to run away so decisively as soon as it realized that it was unable to win, Zhongzun swiftly swung his sword once more. Voila! A pair of arms and legs flew out of the dimension rift before it closed, but the epitome monarch pill had already vanished without a trace. TSK, he got away. Zhongxian clicked his tongue in annoyance. In the end, the epitome monarch pill still had an advantage in the Lake of Comets as it was his home. There were some intricacies in the spatial structure there that Zhongxian was unfamiliar with, which the other party was able to make use of. Furthermore, it was a fact that the epitome monarch pill was stronger than him, so it would be difficult for Zhongxian to stop him from getting away. Nevertheless, through assimilating the pair of arms and legs, Zhongxian's cultivation rose once more, and he successfully reached conferred God-King realm pinnacle. He spent another hour taming all the comets before stowing all of them into his storage ring. Then, he returned to Ao Feng and Luo Chich's side. "Elder Zhong, where should we head to next?" Ao Feng had thought that it would be a brutal battle that would end in Zhongxian's defeat, but who could have known that he would be able to overpower the epitome monarch pill so easily? He was starting to feel like there was nothing in this world that could stop Zhongxian. We'll head to. Just as Zhongxian was about to speak, the space around them suddenly jolted a little. Following that, a brilliant light harnessing energy that made even conferred god kings subconsciously tremble in fear burst out right ahead of them. For an instant, the entire sky was blinded by its radiance. A legendary treasure has surfaced. This phenomenon immediately caught the attention of everyone in the flooding sea. Chapter 2258 The Retaliation of the Veteran Conferred God Kings, such a powerful pulsation of energy that was not caused by a battle that could only mean one thing. A legendary treasure had surfaced. Judging from the energy that had been emanated, its value seemed to exceed even that of the epitome monarch pill. Has anything like this happened in the previous floods of spiritual energy? Zhong Xian asked. Ao Feng, who was also dazed by the situation, shook his head in shock. There were countless treasures lying in the flooding sea, but never had he seen any of them releasing such a frightening outburst of energy. Let's head over to take a look. The three of them flitted ahead, and soon, they arrived at their destination. The phenomenon had alarmed all the conferred god kings and god kings that had entered the flooding sea, drawing them into the vicinity. Each and every one of them was staring at where the pulsation of the spiritual energy was the most violent, with excited looks on their faces. Their gazes were directed at a massive emerald lotus leaf that looked as if it had been sculpted by jade. It was floating in midair, emanating divine light. This is. Just how powerful is that lotus leaf? Its tear is far beyond what any of us can handle. However, if we can obtain it and present it to a god monarch, we'll surely be handsomely rewarded for that. Indeed, the god monarchs wouldn't hesitate to take us in as their direct disciples and confer us if they could obtain the lotus leaf in exchange. We'll be able to rise through the ranks. Everyone was staring at the lotus leaf with heated gazes as they thought about the countless possibilities that could occur if they obtained the lotus leaf. No one knew where the lotus leaf was from or what it was. However, the spiritual energy harnessed within it was so great that anyone who successfully assimilated it, even if the person was a god monarch, would surely enjoy a tremendous surge in power. Amid the discussion, a conferred god king spotted Zhong Xian and the others. Conferred god king Ao Feng. Ao Feng? You are referring to the conferred god king of the sky of Cloud Dragon? Aren't you asking the obvious? Who else could it be other than him? To Zhong Xian's surprise, the weak Ao Feng was actually highly respected among the god kings and conferred god kings. Most of the female cultivators in the area were looking at him with eyes filled with reverence. As it turned out, the conferred god kings of the sky of Cloud Dragon, due to their noble and powerful bloodline, were viewed to be ideal spouses. There were many people who were more than willing to mate with them. It was also for that reason that the descendants carrying the dragon bloodline were scattered all over the worlds. Conferred god king Luo Ying, conferred god king Bai Ji, conferred god king Liu Yang. Ao Feng also returned the greetings one by one like a true gentleman. Conferred god king Ao Feng must have been drawn here by the aura of the treasure as well. Oh, who are the two companions with you? An elder asked as he looked at Zhong Xian and Luo Chichi curiously. They are God King Zhong Xian and God King Luo Chichi. Ao Feng had intended to introduce them formally, but the young man had shot him a look. Realizing that the young man was not willing to reveal his identity, he had gone ahead with a simple introduction instead. The elder nodded before clasping his fist to greet them. Paying respects to God King Zhong Xian and God King Luo Chichi. It's amazing how you have managed to achieve so much despite your age. It seems like the era is really changing. News about how Zhong Xian had killed conferred god King Baiye Qinghong of the sky of Linglong had spread across the 9 skies, and practically everyone in the flooding sea had heard of that incident. There were even some who had been able to acquire a recording of the happenings back then. Their evaluation of the incident was that the young man did possess the means to kill conferred god kings, but his strength was mainly dependent on artifacts. Nevertheless, that was still enough for him to be classified as one of the powerhouses of the firmament, and it would be wise not to make an enemy out of him. For that reason, none of them dared disrespect him. You're too courteous. Zhong Xian returned the greeting. However, the elder frowned in displeasure at Zhong Xian's greeting. He felt like the young man's attitude was a little perfunctory. In truth, the elder had watched the recording of the battle between Zhong Xian and Baiye Qinghong, and he felt like he could have done the same with the weapons bestowed upon him by his god monarch, though it would have taken a bit more effort. In other words, their strength was roughly on par with one another. In fact, if they put aside their artifacts, there was no doubt that he was the stronger one. So, why was this young man acting as if he was some big shot? While the other conferred god kings who had gathered around did not say a thing, they also frowned slightly in disapproval toward Zhongxian's lackadaisical attitude. It was already extremely rude for a junior not to take the initiative to greet a senior first, but the young man's attitude even appeared to be insincere on top of that. Conferred god King Liu Yang. Ao Feng was just about to explain things a little when the elder suddenly waved his hand and said, "All right, let's put aside the formalities for now. Conferred god King Ao Feng, since you are here, I believe that you are eyeing the lotus leaf as well. Since we share the same thoughts, why don't we put our strength together?" Put our strength together? Ao Feng frowned. Indeed. We are all veteran conferred god kings who have survived the previous floods of spiritual energy, and every single one of us possesses our own means. While it would be stretching it to say that our fighting prowess is top-notch, I believe that we don't pale too much in comparison to the others. We have all received orders from the god monarchs to bring the treasures of the flooding sea back to our respective skies, and there is no doubt that the greatest treasure in the flooding sea is the lotus leaf right before us. If we can bring it back, we will surely be generously rewarded by our god monarchs, the elder, conferred god King Liu Yang said. Ao Feng nodded in agreement to those words. While none of them could use the lotus leaf, there were great benefits to be earned if they could present it to their respective god monarchs. May I know if you have heard of the newest conferred god king of our sky of blazing sun, Zhengyang? Conferred god King Liu Yang suddenly asked. Of course, Ao Feng replied. There's no way I wouldn't have heard of him. Even though Zhengyang is a conferred god king of our sky of blazing sun, he's arrogant and conceited. He doesn't show the slightest shred of respect for veteran conferred god kings like us. In fact, he has formed an alliance together with the other young conferred god kings of the other skies to steal the valuable resources in the flooding sea that we have discovered. The more conferred god King Liu Yang spoke, the more furious he got. He stole your resources? Ao Feng was stunned. A conferred god king of the group harumphed angrily. That's right. I found some sealing young grass that would have exceptional effects for god monarch Shuoyang, but he flew right into the ancient domain and claimed it for himself, not giving us the slightest chance at all. Two more conferred god kings chirped in with deep indignation in their voices. It was the same for me. I went through so much difficulty in order to find a sea origin stone, but a person claiming to be his junior suddenly barged in and snatched it. It's really as if they don't have the slightest regard for us at all. It's the same for me. Just because they are a little stronger, they don't show any respect for us at all. This is unacceptable. Having served the god monarchs for so many years, they had contributed greatly to the growth of their respective skies. Yet, instead of taking them as their students, the god monarchs chose to groom a random bunch of youngsters instead. How could they possibly be happy about this? But since it was the decision of the god monarch, they could only swallow their indignation and grudgingly accept the situation. But as if that was not bad enough, those youngsters were actually arrogant scoundrels who did as they please. They took treasures as they deemed fit, not leaving anything for them. If they returned empty-handed, would their god monarchs not think that they were utterly useless? If so, they would be in a shaky position once they returned. Their god monarchs might even find new people to replace them. It was for this reason that they had gathered in such a hurry upon seeing the emergence of the lotus leaf. We, the veteran conferred god kings, have to unite together in order to protect our interest. If we can obtain this lotus leaf and deliver it to our own god monarchs, it will prove that we are no weaker than those younger conferred god kings. Conferred god King Liu Yang exclaimed. On the other hand, if those young scoundrels beat us to it, we will have tough days ahead of us. They will suppress us so badly that we'll never be able to raise our heads again. We'll lose even the final shreds of dignity that we have. So, Ao Feng, what do you say about that? Ao Feng did not expect to suddenly receive such a proposal. So, he turned his gaze to Zhongxian to seek his opinion on the matter. Chapter 2259. A finger will suffice. Ao Feng had already figured out from watching Zhongxian's response earlier that he had some kind of close relation to Zhengyang and the others. Thus, he felt like this fight was kind of hopeless. The veteran conferred god kings were going to suffer such a tragic defeat that they would not even know what had hit them. Putting aside the fact that Zhongxian possessed the strength to overwhelm the epitome monarch pill, even Zheng Yang and the others were already more than what the veteran conferred god kings could handle. He had once fought one of them, and he knew that they were not even on the same level. To plot against them right in front of the conferred god king of the nine skies. Were they brave, or were they just tired of living? What, you don't dare go against them? Conferred god King Liu Yang scoffed after seeing Ao Feng's hesitation. It's just a simple fight over the lotus. Even if those younger conferred god kings are angry at their loss, what can they do about it? As a pure-blooded dragon from the sky of Cloud Dragon, surely you won't be scared by just this much. I'm not scared, but... Ao Feng said hesitantly. It's fine as long as you aren't scared. This matter is settled then. Conferred god King Liu Yang had no intention of letting Ao Feng back out. He then turned his gaze to Zhongxian and Luo Chichi and asked, "What about you two?" "We'll pass," Zhongxian replied. "Well, all he has is his artifact, so I reckon that he won't be much help in a real fight. As for Luo Chichi, I've never even heard of her before, and she hasn't been conferred. Even if they join us, I don't think that they'll be able to contribute much. What can two youngsters do in a fight among conferred god kings?" The other conferred god kings did not pay much heed to Zhongxian's rejection. While they were speaking, conferred god King Liu Yang suddenly exclaimed, "Here they come." There was a slight disturbance in the space in the distance, but taking a closer look, one could see a figure rushing over at an incredibly fast speed. It was a tall and slender young lady with a sword in her hand, commanding a valiant posture. Conferred god King Zhao Ya. Upon seeing the face of the person heading over, conferred god King Luo Ying's eyes immediately reddened in rage. It was this woman who had beaten him to the treasure that he had spotted earlier. Huala. So, conferred god King Luo Ying raised his sword and pointed it at the young lady in the sky. "Zhao Ya, I know that you possess superior strength, but the veteran conferred god kings have already formed an alliance with one another. Back down now, or you'll suffer." Zhao Ya shot a glance at conferred god King Luo Ying before looking away, paying no heed to the latter's words at all. She continued flying toward the lotus with a nonchalant look on her face. Huala. Seeing that Zhao Ya was adamant about claiming the lotus, the other conferred god kings immediately drew their weapons before leaping forth to block her path. Over the past few days, Zhao Ya had already made her name as one of the strongest conferred god king in the firmament. They were confident that they would be able to defeat her if they ganged up on her, but they also knew that they would not be able to get out unscathed if a battle did occur. Furthermore, this so-called alliance was not exactly reliable. It was informal, and their interests were not fully aligned with one another. There was no saying when they would be betrayed by one another. So, they hoped to just frighten her so that she would back down. "You wish to block my way?" Zhao Ya lowered her gaze and looked at them with an air of majesty. Her black hair contrasted with the silver armor she donned, making her appear to be a valiant goddess of war. Conferred god King Luo Ying harumphed. "It's all fair competition," conferred god King Zhao Ya. "I don't have time to waste on you lot." Zhao Ya waved her hand dismissively as she insistently advanced forward. "Audacious. How dare you? It seems like you really have no regard for us at all." They had made their intent clear, but the young lady still tried to bypass them. Liu Yang and the other conferred god kings immediately flew into a rage as they made their moves. Channeling their energies together, they swiftly formed a massive barrier of zhenqi in the air to block Zhao Ya's path. The destructive energies that flowed through the barrier felt so overwhelming that there were no cultivators who would not feel powerless in its face. Anyone who forcefully barged through the barrier would suffer grave injuries or even death. Zhao Ya frowned a little upon seeing their movements. She raised her sword and slashed it down on the barrier. Boom! The barrier was decisively severed before dissipating, and the conferred god kings were forced to retreat dozens of steps from the rebound. Their faces paled in fright as they stared at the young lady in the air in disbelief. They had known that she would be a difficult opponent to deal with, but they did not expect her to be so powerful. She had already grown to the level where she could sever a barrier they had set up with ease. Ao Feng, what are you waiting for? Make your move. Conferred God King Liu Yang exclaimed anxiously. But before he could finish his words, Zhao Huaiye had already descended to where Ao Feng and the others were standing, and with reddened eyes, her knees fell to the ground. Unfilial disciple Zhao Huaiye pays respects to teacher. Disciple? Teacher? Silence. Everyone was flabbergasted. This was because the person whom Zhao Huaiye was kneeling before was none other than God King Zhongxian, whom they had snubbed a moment ago. Not only so, she seemed to be so agitated that her body was trembling intensely, and her eyes had grown a little moist. No one would have thought that there would be such a frail side to the valiant young lady. What was going on? Did this mean that the ferocious conferred God King Zhao Huaiye, who was inhumanely strong, was a student of God King Zhongxian? But was he not just an apothecary? When in the world did he become Zhao Huaiye's teacher? Hula! Just as everyone was shocked beyond words, deafening sonic booms echoed in the air as another 10 youths flew over to where they were. *T. This is really bad. It's Zheng Yang and the others. Have they really joined hands with one another? This is madness. Seeing the figures that were heading over, many of the veteran conferred God Kings could not help but retreat a little out of nervousness. Thinking that these 10 youths were coming after them after hearing of their alliance, they immediately raised their weapons to protect themselves. But what they imagined did not come to happen. Instead, those 10 youths descended to Zhao Huaiye's side, and with the same reddened eyes, they kneeled to the ground. With an earnest and deeply respectful attitude, they lowered their heads and said, "Unfilial disciple Zheng Yang pays respect to teacher. Unfilial disciple Liu Yang pays respect to teacher." Their voices echoed loudly in the air, jolting the hearts of the veteran conferred God Kings. All of them are the disciples of God King Zhongxian. But they are the strongest conferred God Kings of the firmament, the cultivators whom the 6 God monarchs groomed personally. How could they all be God King Zhongxian's disciples? My goodness, can you pinch me hard so that I can check if... Yout. What are you doing, you dumbass? Conferred God King Liu Yang and the others were going insane. Never in their long lives had they seen anything so ridiculous. Zhao Huaiye, Zheng Yang, and the others were already ridiculously powerful by themselves, but they were actually all from the same lineage. To make matters worse, their teacher turned out to be the humble God King whom they had looked down on a moment ago. Things were really starting to get out of hand. Did we look down on him earlier? Is it too late to start fawning over him now? Is there anything that we can say to reverse the situation? Everyone could already feel tears welling up in their eyes. Earlier, when God King Ao Feng introduced him, they did not think that he was anything much. In fact, most of them had even felt that he was a conceited young man. But looking back, they were the ones who were being conceited. Putting aside how strong he was, just the fact that he had so many overwhelmingly powerful disciples meant that it would not be excessive even if they welcomed him with the highest level of formality. If they had treated the young man better, there might still have been some room for reconciliation. But it was a pity that they had allowed the opportunity to slip through their fingers. There was nothing they could do. Meanwhile, seeing how much his direct disciples had grown over the past month, Zhongxian nodded in approval and said, "Rise." They had not let him down. The years he had spent teaching them had not been in vain. "Teacher, I heard that there's a particularly powerful expert known as the conferred God King of the 9 skies in the flooding sea. Have you met him yet?" Zheng Yang asked as he brandished his spear to the side. "What's wrong?" Zhongxian asked with a frown. "I have been hearing how powerful he is from the God monarchs over the past few days, so I have been wanting to challenge him to a battle to prove our teacher's name," Zheng Yang declared haughtily. Hearing those words, Zhongxian nearly choked on his own saliva. He looked at Zheng Yang for a moment before asking, "You are certain about it?" "Yes, I am," Zheng Yang replied determinedly. The others were also nodding vehemently, expressing their agreement toward Zheng Yang's words. Only Zhao Huaiye was covering her face speechlessly, as if trying to act as if she did not know those fools standing beside her. "Very well. All of you should come at me together," Zhongxian said as he placed a hand behind his back. "Just one finger will suffice." Chapter 2269 Sky's Lotus Leaf. Baffled by their teacher's words, Zhongxian's direct disciples were stunned for a moment before realization suddenly struck them, and their faces started twitching. With a hushed voice, Zhao Yue muttered quietly to the dense Yuan Dao, who still did not seem to understand what was going on, "Our teacher is the conferred God King of the Nine Skies." There was a moment of awkward silence before Zheng Yang started laughing stiffly. "Ha ha ha, teacher. I wonder what kind of treasure that lotus leaf over there is. I don't understand it at all. Ha ha ha." If they had known that their teacher was the conferred God King of the Nine Skies, they never would have dared to brag like that. Ever since they had come under their teacher, every single time they thought that they had finally grown stronger, their teacher would pummel them heavily and put them back in their place. While they had grown tremendously over the past month, somehow, their instincts were screaming at them that if they went through with the battle, they would be beaten up so badly that they would be wailing at the end of it. A gentle smile formed on Zhongxian's lips as he said, "The lotus leaf over there might be eye-catching, but let's not lose sight of what we are going to do, all right?" Seeing that his attempt to distract his teacher was futile, Zheng Yang's face collapsed in despair as he cried, "I wouldn't dare to challenge teacher to a battle. There's no need to stand on ceremony. Let's begin right away," Zhongxian replied. Boom. Just as Zhongxian and his direct disciples were celebrating their long-awaited reunion with a good mix of physical intimacy and screams of joy, the lotus leaf in the air suddenly released a loud explosion sound. Its leaves had fully matured, and they were radiating a blinding glow. Great streams of concentrated spiritual energy were flowing out from it. Even just absorbing the bits that leaked out was enough to leave those gathered around feeling revitalized. Everyone immediately turned toward the lotus leaf. Unlike before, new inscriptions had appeared on the lotus leaf, giving it an enigmatic yet ancient appearance. That is, the geographical terrain and constellation map of the Nine Skies. Zhongxian widened his eyes in astonishment. He had seen the geographical terrain and constellation map of the Sky of Spirit Origin, Sky of Drifting Spectre, and Sky of Linglong, and he could see them depicted clearly through the inscriptions on the massive lotus leaf. He could tell that the lotus leaf was a natural artifact of the firmament, yet it had been born with a complete map of the Nine Skies. This was extremely perplexing. Not only so, I can also sense the aura of the Nine Skies from it. Just what in the world is that lotus leaf? Zhongxian was bewildered. Without a doubt, the lotus leaf was a treasure beyond anything he had seen before. If he could assimilate it, it would do his cultivation much good. Even pushing for a breakthrough to the God Monarch realm on the spot was not completely impossible. Now, all of a sudden, conferred God King Liu Yang bellowed before rushing straight for the lotus leaf. He knew that they would not stand a chance once Zhongxian and the others made their move, so he decided to make the first move. As long as he could successfully grab the lotus leaf, he would immediately rush to the outer perimeter of the flooding sea and inform God Monarch Shuoyang to teleport him out right away. Then, no matter how powerful Zhongxian was, there was no way he could snatch the lotus leaf from the hands of the God Monarchs. The other conferred God Kings also made their moves. With their powers, they weaved together a massive net that swiftly closed in on the lotus leaf. Through this, they could ensure that no one could get to the lotus leaf before them. Teacher. Seeing that someone was trying to beat them to it, Zhao Yue and Zheng Yang's eyebrows shot up in displeasure. It was one thing to be beaten up by their teacher, but they would not allow a treasure that would benefit their teacher to be taken before their eyes. It won't be that easy for them to take the lotus leaf. Let's just wait and see, Zhongxian said as he stopped his direct disciple from getting involved. He could not tell what kind of treasure the lotus leaf was, but just from the inscriptions and the aura of the Nine Skies it was emanating, it was clear that it was not an artifact that a couple of average conferred God Kings could handle. As he had guessed, while the massive net was about to wrap itself around the lotus leaf swayed a little, and the space in the surroundings immediately shattered. Catcher. A spatial shockwave rippled outward. Peng peng peng. The conferred God Kings that had gathered around the lotus leaf were struck on the chest, and a deep laceration appeared on their bodies. They were knocked flying into the distance as blood spewed from their mouths. Frightening. Zheng Yang and the others narrowed their eyes in shock. Even though their fighting prowess far surpassed these veteran conferred God Kings, They were not certain that they could have coped with that attack if they had been the ones facing it. That was how powerful the lotus leaf was. Realizing this, Zhao Wei looked at her juniors and said, "Let's go together, UN." With a determined nod, the 11 direct disciples of Zhongxian each took a deep breath before charging toward the lotus leaf together. Unlike the veteran conferred god kings, their teamwork was nearly impeccable. In the blink of an eye, they had already gotten into position to form a collaborative formation. Their combined might was probably enough to face even a god monarch for a short period of time. Unable to withstand their might, the surrounding space began to tear as a massive spatial storm broke out around the lotus leaf. The lotus leaf seemed to be a little pressured facing such a furious onslaught of attacks. It suddenly began expanding larger and larger, reaching a size comparable to the sky itself. Then, with a twist, it swept itself across the cultivators standing against it. T. Zhongxian widened his eyes in shock. He immediately drew the Crimson Heaven sword and slashed it down on the lotus leaf. The sword Qi carried an unyielding will and bolted toward the lotus leaf. Just as it was about to strike its target, the massive lotus leaf suddenly swayed once again. In an instant, Zhongxian suddenly experienced a bout of weightlessness. The space around him began warping at an insanely fast pace, and he suddenly found himself standing in the midst of a lush field. It was a boundless grassland that extended to the horizons. "I have returned to the firmament." Zhongxian was stunned. The land beneath his feet felt different from that of the flooding sea, and he could sense the aura of the 9 skies around him. He seemed to have returned to the firmament. "No, that isn't right. I have entered the firmament inscribed on the surface of the lotus leaf." Zhongxian swiftly noticed that something was amiss. The firmament was closed off, but it was not isolated. The real firmament still carried a link to the rest of the myriad worlds, but he could not feel it there. He paid close attention to it. There were more differences between the area where he was and the real firmament. "Teacher." A voice echoed not too far away. Zhongxian quickly turned his head, and he saw Zhao Wei and the others flying in his direction. Fortunately, it did not appear that they were injured. He heaved a sigh of relief inwardly. Gazing into the sky, he said contemplatively, "There is something really weird about the lotus leaf. To think that it has an expanse of space comparable to the 9 skies within it. Not to mention, it was able to pull us in here so easily. With their strength combined, they were strong enough to even deal with the god monarchs. Yet, they were far too helpless in the face of the lotus leaf. Just what kind of artifact was it to possess such unfathomable prowess? The flaw probably lies here." Zhongxian quickly looked around the area, but he was unable to find an exit. So, he lifted the Crimson Heaven sword in his grasp and hacked it down on the ground beneath him. If there was no way out in sight, the most plausible way out would be the ground. While the lotus leaf wielded enigmatic abilities, Zhongxian did not think that it would be able to withstand an attack of his full might. So, he channeled his spirit, soul, and psyche into his sword and struck down with all his strength. Huala! A burst of sword Qi inflicted a massive crack in the ground, and spiritual energy immediately poured out from there. Without any hesitation, Zhongxian and his direct disciples leaped into the crack, and the next moment, Luo Chichi's anxious face appeared before their eyes. "Are you all okay?" Luo Chichi asked worriedly. Zhongxian nodded before speaking his thoughts aloud. "I don't understand. Just what kind of treasure is that?" "I'm not sure. However, I think I heard those injured veteran conferred god kings calling it the 9 skies lotus leaf," Luo Chichi said. As she had been outside the whole time, she had overheard the discussion among the other conferred god kings. 9 skies lotus leaf. Zhongxian was a little taken aback. A familiar-sounding name popped up in his head as he muttered, "The 9 skies lotus embryo?" You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.